Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, July 1st, 2021. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Slate Justice and Courts reporter Mark Joseph Stern on the pain of a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. Meanwhile, Trump's CFO surrenders to face criminal charges. And Donald Rumsfeld, famous for killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people by lying the U.S. into a war, has died. Meanwhile, Kevin McCarthy threatens any Republican caucus member who attempts to sit on the January 6th commission. An Exxon lobbyist caught on tape lists his Senate allies blocking climate legislation. Half of them are Democrats. The Pacific Northwest heat wave, not just coincidentally, may have killed hundreds of people. And this late-breaking Supreme Court ruling, the conservative majority takes another chunk out of the Voting Rights Act, putting more pressure on the need to pass some voter protection in the Senate and the House. Revised New York City mayor race numbers has Adams with a slight lead. Meanwhile, Amazon complains that the new FTC chair, Lina Khan, has studied too much antitrust law. And lastly, Donald Trump rejects Ron DeSantis' plea to postpone his Florida rally as they are still digging bodies out of the Surfside wreckage. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday. Emma is out until Tuesday on vacation. We're all going to be out on Monday. We're going to run a repeat for you. You will enjoy. You will enjoy. And but Emma's on much needed, well-deserved vacation. I am here with you today, and let's get right into this. I'll have a lot more to say. The fun half. Matt Binder's going to come in. Brandon Sutton, Matt Leck will be here. I'll have more to say about this tomorrow. But Donald Rumsfeld died, and the timing is a little bit off. Had he died 25 years ago, let's say, there would be hundreds of thousands of people, more than likely, alive at this point. There would be maybe millions of fewer refugees who had left Iraq, millions who had not moved within Iraq, fleeing their area that they lived. And like I say, by anybody's counts, even the U.S. government's counts, there would be hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians still alive today had Donald Rumsfeld departed this life earlier. He did not, and we did have a war that we were lied into by Donald Rumsfeld, was one of those key liars and architects of that. We did have hundreds of thousands of innocents dead. We have ongoing problems in that region. And we also initiated a torture regime that the vestiges of which remain in Guantanamo Bay to this day. So Donald Rumsfeld leaves with hopefully that something to that effect will be put on his tombstone. I doubt it will be. He didn't seem to have even the slightest bit of remorse. He seemed to enjoy it. That was my sense, and watching him in real time. Here's a segment of him recalling that moment that he had given Saddam Hussein chemical weapons in their war with Iran.
Well, let me take you back about 20 years ago. The date, I believe, was in December 20th, 1983. You were meeting with Saddam Hussein. I think we have some video of that. Of that meeting. Tell me what was going on during this
Where did you get this video? From the Iraqi television?
This is from Iraqi television.
When did they give it to you? Recently or back then?
We've dug this out of the CNN library.
I see. Isn't that interesting? There I am.
Yeah, there he is. I mean, at that time he was giving weapons, chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein to fight against the Iranians. Horrible, horrible weapons. There, of course, were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, any more so than cannons or guns are weapons of mass destruction. They stretched the definition of what weapons of mass destruction were. Then they claimed that they were moved to Syria. They claimed that they were hiding in bunkers. They were lying the whole time. Every single proclamation they made that was definitive was, in fact, definitionally a lie. This was information that was more or less readily available. We had weapons inspectors on the ground, but the hunger for war in this country was so great that we literally kicked the weapons inspectors out so that we could start to bomb because they weren't finding anything. So rest in whatever the opposite of peace is to Donald Rumsfeld, who passed away today. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Mark Joseph Stern. We're only going to be talking about the Supreme Court cases that were announced last week. I will give you an update on the ones that are being announced this morning right after we talk to Mark Joseph Stern, right after this. Hey, folks, today's program sponsored in part by BetterHelp Online Counseling, who is giving our audience 10% off their first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. BetterHelp gives you access to your own fully licensed and accredited therapist via phone, chat, or video. I know this firsthand. A lot of therapists all over, particularly right now, have long wait lists. It can take up to weeks, sometimes months, before they can see you. Well, when you sign up with BetterHelp, they match you with a therapist based on your specific needs. You'll be communicating with them in less than 24 hours. They have access to therapists all around the country. COVID, obviously, the pandemic, a crap show in many respects. Sort of like the wake of it is almost, for a lot of people, I don't know about the majority, I haven't seen any stats on this, but even more stressful. Sort of like returning to normalcy. The concept of like, we went through this very traumatic thing, and what do we get at the end of it? Just what, more or less what we had before, maybe a little bit less. It's like, usually when you go through a trauma like this, you're like, oh, I'm going to get a reward for making it through. In this instance, yeah, congratulations. You're back to your, like, yeah, if you're lucky, B+ life. Anyways. Once BetterHelp connects you with a therapist, if you don't think it's a good fit, you can switch to a new one at any time, for any reason, for no additional charge. They have thousands of licensed therapists from all over the country. They have therapists with specialties that may not be available in your area. BetterHelp also tends to be more affordable than therapists you'd find through traditional means. You don't need to have insurance to use BetterHelp. Of course, they accept it. And they also have financial aid options for those who qualify. BetterHelp is giving everyone in our audience 10% off your first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. That's BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. You can find the URL in your video description if you're watching this on YouTube or in our podcast. description if you're listening. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. When you become a member of the Majority Report, you not only get you not only support the free show, but you get the free show free of commercials, and you get extra content every day with the fun half. Plus, I mean, I guess theoretically, if you're not a member, of course you can buy the merch, but it doesn't mean as much, I would imagine. It's a little bit more of a hollow gesture. People are buying these what do you call it? What are those? What are the suns out, guns out?
The tank tops?
Yeah, the tank tops. I don't know the latest tallies, but last I checked, we were at 54. If it gets to 100, I'm wearing one of the tank tops on a Friday fun half. Maybe I'll do it on another fun half day.
That'll take your B+ up to an A-.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to take a lot of other people's B+ to an A-. But I got to start lifting weights. Because you know that's going to be the problem.
Well, now that people have seen your calves, the expectations are through the roof.
I may just wear it actually instead of shorts, because the calves are much better than the arms. I can tell you that right now. Anyways, shop.majorityreportradio.com for merchandise. We also got the Steven Crowder quote, "Oh no, Sam Cedar, what an effing nightmare" shirt, which is flying like it's going like hotcakes. Limited run for that one. We got to wait for the next time that we bomb a debate. But check it out. Remember, it's your support that makes this show possible. And don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. Okay, now that interview with Mark Joseph Stern. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report joining us. Welcome. I want to welcome back to the program Mark Joseph Stern. He is a staff writer at Slate who writes about the courts and the law. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. I know we should say we are pre-taping this last night because as people are seeing this live, you are anticipating the final two decisions of the Supreme Court in this term, Brnovich versus DNC, which is a voting rights case that it's, I believe, out of Colorado, if I'm not mistaken.
Arizona,
and AFP versus Bonta, that is about disclosure of money, both of which are hugely important, and we will be talking about those in the following week as we get those decisions. But there have been 3 or 4 in particular cases over the past week or two, I guess, a little less, that have been decided by the court that are going to have implications, I think, for years to come. Let's start with Cedar Point Nursery versus Hassid. Tell us the facts in that case.
Yeah, so this is a case about a California law that has been on the books for many decades and was the culmination of Cesar Chavez's labor organizing in California. So it specifically allows union organizers and union advocates to go onto farms, commercial farms in California for up to 3 hours a day during non-working hours for a total of 120 days a year. And let's be clear, we're talking about an hour at lunch break or an hour when almost everybody is done working. Like, this is not really intrusive for business owners. And the reason this law exists is that a lot of California's agricultural workers are abused and exploited, and a lot of them don't speak English, are migrants or undocumented immigrants. They travel from place to place looking for work. And if union organizers can't reach them at work, they can't reach them at all. So this law has been a huge...
Excuse me, but it will also... Very often these people live on the farm itself. So these places function both as their place of work, but also their temporary residence.
And even those who don't live on the farm often live close by, and the farm will actually pay contractors to bus them back and forth from their home to the farm. So they are not available outside of work, which is a huge problem, because if they want to organize collectively and say, stop abusing us, they really need a union. And if the union can't access them at work, again, they're just not going to be able to access them at all. So the question here is whether this law that lets union organizers access these farms for a limited period constitutes a taking under the Constitution. And that's kind of a weird question, because when we think about a taking, it's usually like eminent domain, like the government has to build a road where your house is, or like a railroad where your business is. It's not usually a person stepping on someone's property. In fact, that's never before been considered a taking by the Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court considered this law many decades ago, it said that there was not even a real conflict, that there was no legitimate constitutional question here. But the Supreme Court has changed since then. And by a 6-3 vote, this Supreme Court held that union organizers stepping on the property of a business is a taking under the Constitution, and that every time it happens, the state or the union has to compensate the business owner for invading their own private property.
Just the idea of the remedy or the addressing of the taking shows how ridiculous this is, because what is the cost associated with a farm with someone stepping on the property? Does it go up if they take 2 steps into the property? Is it more expensive if 2 people walk on? Is it more expensive if the person who walks onto the property is heavier than another person? Like, how do you establish, how could it be a taking if there's no value that's diminished from a farmer or a big ag company? And how do you establish what the compensation would be?
So that's a great question. And I think one clue here is the fact that the plaintiffs in this case, the big ag businesses that brought this case, they didn't even ask for compensation. They just asked for an injunction that will block these union organizers from stepping on their property, period. And so I think what that shows is that they're not really after compensation. They understand that it's almost like a metaphysical question of what the cost is of a person on your property. They just want to force these union organizers to stay off their farms. They want to either bankrupt the unions or the state by forcing them to pay a ton of money, or I think more reasonably, just to secure a court order that says you're not allowed on here. And at the end of the day, their actual desire for compensation themselves doesn't seem to exist. This is about sticking it to unions.
I mean, did the court come up with a formula to, because they've created, it seems to me, my understanding of the court in the past has been, regardless of how the outcome of the decision is that often what they want to do is resolve questions rather than create new ones. Because this seems to me, every single instance of someone walking onto a farm to go and unionize ag workers, there's going to have to be a new court case to determine how you calculate the cost of this taking.
Right. And so that's why, again, I think maybe the real goal here is to make unions in the state give up, to just make them empty their coffers in lawyers' fees trying to figure this out. But, when you read the Chief Justice's opinion, he wrote the majority opinion here for all 6 conservatives. It's a little odd because you're reading him saying that this is a taking, that it's invasion of property, okay, whatever. And then you get to the end where you expect him to explain what value is detracted from the land. How you calculate or compensate an owner for what's going on here. And instead the opinion just ends and he just sends the case back down. He doesn't even address that. And so it seems like Roberts understands what the plaintiffs understood, which is that the overarching goal of this case is not to secure pennies from union organizers or the state. The goal is to make this scheme so unworkable and so confusing and so caught up in the courts that it just collapses and California eventually repeals the law.
So what was the theory about passing the law? I understand why California passed the law, and that is because they feel that workers have a right to unionize. But is there also is there a societal benefit? Because what I'm getting at here is where does this lead? Aside from the fact that it seems to be just a roadblock to allow people to organize and to weaken unions. And that is done by really, in some ways, leveraging the fact that the court didn't address even in a formula as to how you would figure out how, what this, a taking is, right? A traditional taking is, we are seizing this property And how much is this property worth? Well, we can bring in real estate agents to tell us what this would go for in this locality. Or, I mean, there's an existing mechanism to put a price on that. There is no price on trespass and going in a union. I mean, I don't even know how you would calculate that, frankly. But my point is that, like, if it is not allowing the state to say that we perceive a benefit to society, to allow these workers to not be exploited, to form a union, what's the limiting principle there as to what a state can do if it is a physical property right I'm being diminished with a property right because of this state regulation? What regulation wouldn't be a taking?
Yeah, so I think that's the right question to ask. And the answer is pretty alarming. Justice Breyer in his dissent asked the same question, and he points to all of these laws that states have passed that allow individuals to trespass or invade private property, usually commercial businesses, for various inspections. Think of basic health and safety inspections. You know, the state often sends its own agents into businesses to make sure they're following the rules. But the reality is that sometimes the state also contracts with private companies, kind of like the way that California delegated this to unions. It's not always state actors who are doing this. There are private companies that work for the state to conduct various inspections, from meatpacking plants to private schools and everything in between. And so the question now is, well, are those takings as well? When the state forces, commercial businesses to let inspectors, whether they're state agents or contractors, enter their property, is that also a taking that requires compensation? And, the majority, through Chief Justice Roberts, it doesn't really have a good answer. I honestly think that the answer boils down to, we hate unions so much that we're going to create a special rule that applies only to them. I mean, you see Roberts carving out these exceptions. Oh, well, health inspections are different. Commercial businesses are different from ag businesses. But I think it's all smoke and mirrors. I really think this is like the Janus decision 3 years ago, where the Supreme Court just carved out this weird rule that hobbles unions, and then basically said, just to be clear, this doesn't apply to anybody else. We're only talking about unions because we really hate them.
But is there a possibility that, let's say, okay, I mean, when all of a sudden it becomes, well, it's 6-3 now, but maybe it becomes 7-2, because we know how loath Justice Breyer is to the idea that he would even have any consciousness about, it's absurd that a Supreme Court justice would have any consciousness of the implication of maybe that they would die while they're on the court. But be that as it may, what's to prevent a majority of 5 out of 7, let's say, or 6 for that matter, to say, like, well, actually, there's a lot of stuff here that is going to formulate our opinions in the future as to whether government can do these regulations, because if they can't enforce them, what's the point of the regulation? Or this sign that they've told us, employees must wash their hands before they go out, like that. That's a taking. I mean, I've got to put a sign in my studio about the rights that my employees have. That's literally taking real estate in my office. I want to hang up my many awards on that wall, and I can't now because I've got to put up that sign. Like what? Like it feels like this is a building block for something really horrible in the future.
Yeah, and how about a civil rights law that says you have to allow Black people to enter your business? Is every Black person who enters your business a taking that the state enforces that then the state has to pay you for? Does the state have to pay businesses for complying with the law? I think, again, the answer is it just depends on what the court does next. This time around, Roberts did all this hand waving where he said, we're not talking about anything else. We're just talking about unions and, California farms. But again, these questions are the right ones. And I do think, especially looking at some of these radical lower court judges, I think that SCOTUS has handed them a weapon to use against all manner of regulations, not just health and safety laws, but civil rights laws and all the stuff you were just discussing, to say, oh, well, according to Cedar Point, this is a taking. The Supreme Court didn't say it, but we're just extending its logic to where it should go. And that really frightens me, because I do think that the Supreme Court's conservatives understand that these lower courts are packed with radical Trump nominees. They understand that what they hint at in their own majority opinions will be seized upon and expanded by the radical lower courts. So it will be a problem for other states. We will be seeing conservative law firms bringing a raft of new lawsuits that claim that all kinds of very, very minor burdens on businesses are takings, and really trying to kind of dismantle the operation of the law as we know it by forcing states to pay untold sums just to make businesses comply with statutes.
That's a massive, an important point for people to understand, the way that these Supreme Court decisions, even if they say it only applies to this case. I know that Bush v. Gore, which was supposedly supposed to be, sui generis and not to be cited, has been cited many, many times on a circuit court level, on a district court level. And so you could have entire regions of the country who are operating under a very restrictive set of restrictions on what states can do in terms of providing regulations for businesses. It seems extraordinary to me. But let's move on to another case that has, I think, other implications in terms of like people's access to courts. This is TransUnion versus Ramirez. Tell us the facts in that case.
And such an important point that this case really is about access to justice. It's wrapped up in some kind of technical legalese that can be difficult for people to understand, but this is about Congress's ability to create and enforce rights, an ability that I think the court basically took away in TransUnion. So backing up, Congress a long time ago passed a law that said that credit reporting agencies have to put all of these processes in place before labeling somebody a criminal or a terrorist, because there's laws against extending credit to people who are criminals or terrorists. So these reporting agencies want to, label those individuals so that they can say, oh, well, we warned you, but they're really bad at it. No surprise if you've ever dealt with a credit agency. They are really terrible at figuring out who is a terrorist or a criminal, and labeled thousands and thousands and thousands of people terrorists and criminals when they were no such thing, just because they happened to share a first and last name with someone who was. And according to Congress, if these agencies labeled you as a terrorist or a criminal, you could go to court, to a federal court, and sue them and collect damages. And that's exactly what thousands of people did. They discovered that TransUnion had called them terrorists or criminals. They discovered that TransUnion had failed to comply with all of these basic processes to keep that from happening. And they sued TransUnion and said, you violated our rights. And the Supreme Court threw out their case. And I think it's really important to focus on exactly what the Supreme Court did here. The court didn't say that TransUnion had complied with the law. The court didn't even pretend that there was any argument that TransUnion complied with the law. The court admitted that TransUnion broke the law. But what the court said was that in its view, in the view of 5 justices on the Supreme Court, Congress was wrong to say that you are harmed when a credit reporting agency calls you a terrorist, that is not a real harm, and that it is the job of 5 justices on the Supreme Court, not Congress, to decide what counts as real harm. And because the justices disagreed with Congress's determination that that was harm, they threw out the case and said that all of those individuals who were labeled terrorists don't have a right to sue in federal court. And what that means at bottom is that the court said Congress does not have authority to create new rights by statute and does not have authority to open the federal courthouse doors to victims, to individuals whose rights, as defined by Congress, were violated.
Okay, so this is this is so jam-packed with problems here. And we should say that, the idea here is that there were people who were on this list who were labeled by the credit agencies, and some of them had their loans rejected, or they couldn't rent a place, or, whatever it was that being on this list prohibits you from doing. Other people had yet to find out that they were going to be denied a car loan or, a rental or whatnot. And it's that set of people that the court says you have no damages here, even though there's been a statutory rule that says that just being on that list is in and of itself a damage, because Congress wants to make sure that these companies that deal with a tremendous amount of sensitive information are doing it in a responsible way. So the first thing is that there's two. It seems to me there's two different sort of levels in which you can look at this. This is the structural question of how the court's relationship with Congress, and then there's also just the absurd notion that these credit agencies exist not to create lists, but to use the information. So this information ultimately is going to be used, and the idea that you have to wait for the harm to exist, and then you as an individual have to go sue TransUnion, you're not going to do that because it's going to cost you a tremendous amount of money and time. It could take you 2 or 3 years to sue TransUnion at that point to get off this list, and you can't get your car. You can't rent a place. You can't buy a home, whatever it is. So there's that sort of narrow problem with it. But this other part where Congress doesn't have the ability to create a right, that seems to diminish Congress's power. And also, what happened to the whole activist judges thing?
Right. So this case is really interesting because Justice Clarence Thomas peeled off from the conservatives, the other conservatives, and dissented along with the liberals. And I think it's worth highlighting here, this is the impact of a 6-3 conservative majority, right? Even if one conservative justice peels off from the pack, the case will still come out the same way. It will still be a conservative decision because the deck is so stacked with these conservatives. And so Clarence Thomas dissented. It didn't make a difference, but I think his dissent is really absolutely correct top to bottom. He makes the points that you just made. He says, how could it be that having this time bomb in this, in someone's computer, in someone's file drawer, there is a time bomb for thousands of people who are about to walk into a car dealership and discover that they are not able to get credit, but they can't actually sue until they're turned away, which is just totally contrary to what Congress wanted. Congress wanted there to be responsible reporting on the back end of this stuff. But looking at the bigger picture, this notion that Congress can't create rights, if that is true, then Congress has been violating the Constitution since 1789, because the very first Congress created rights outside of what courts had acknowledged, gave people the right to enforce them, and ever since then, Congress has been doing the exact same thing. What Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote the majority opinion here, did was sort of overturn 200 plus years of history in favor of this abstract idea that only federal judges get to decide what counts as harm, that only federal judges get to decide what counts as an injury, that the decision, again, of 5 justices should override the decision of Congress and the president when they're passing a law. And that is such outrageous judicial supremacy. I mean, it takes a doctrine that's supposed to be about judicial modesty and uses it to just turbocharge the justice's power and the federal court's power to override Congress and the people's representatives. It's a totally backwards use of standing doctrine. And I really think Clarence Thomas has it right. And when Clarence Thomas is the rational one, that this court is in trouble.
How could Congress pass a law that says, you know what, we need to protect the privacy of American citizens? So these credit agencies cannot use, this bit of information. They can't use the Social Security number, or they can't use. Could Congress do that? I mean, there'd be no mechanism to enforce it at that point if it's a civil law, would there be? Until somebody finds out that they have because TransUnion. If Congress said tomorrow you cannot collect Social Security numbers, TransUnion did. They collected them. They said, well, we haven't done anything that cost anybody yet. There's no remedy for that.
Correct. I think that the Supreme Court would say that the victims of that that misdeed could not sue in federal court, that they were not harmed, they never experienced an injury. The only injury was on the back end, and so they do not have any right to go into federal court. Congress tried to allow for them. Basically what happened in a previous case called Spokio, where the court hinted at what it did in TransUnion, but didn't have the votes yet. They were waiting basically on Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, where the court said, you know, yeah, this company was collecting all of this data illegally. It violated this law that Congress passed, but we're not really sure that people have standing because they didn't know about it. They weren't injured. So it's just too damn bad.
Wow, that's nuts. And we should also say it's just one more example of closing the courthouse door, because it sets up all these obstacles that make it impossible for people to pursue a claim. You lose the entire power of class action lawsuits to change the behavior of companies that are acting outside the bounds of law or outside the bounds of what society wants at that point. Because you could say the courts are responsible for determining whether there's been an injury here, but they'll never get to assess that if you can't afford to bring a lawsuit.
Right. And if you can't band together with people who experienced a similar injury and all sue collectively, because the damages in this case individually were not that much. Couple $1,000 bucks. No reasonable person is going to sue for a couple $1,000 bucks. But if you can find 5,000 other people who experience the same injury, which is how these cases always work, then you can, you know, reasonably bring a case and expect to get some money out of it. But this Supreme Court hates class actions. It hates the idea of people suing collectively. It thinks that that's an egregious abuse of the court system. And so I do think that this is another example of the court creating these new doctrines and new theories for the very obvious purpose of tamping down and busting up class actions around the country.
Right. I mean, this is reminiscent of AT&T and Concepcion.
Yes,
the one where you had AT&T overcharging, I think, hundreds of thousands of customers, like $3 a month. Nobody's going to go sue AT&T for $36 a year. It's just, you can't, and no lawyer's going to take that case because it's just not worth the amount of work that you would have to do involved. But there's no way to inhibit AT&T from, like, oh, we made a mistake. We overcharged 300,000 people that's a lot of money for them. And there's no disincentive or remedy to stop them from doing it, it feels like at this point.
Right. And what the court said was it was perfectly fine for AT&T to put in their contract in tiny print at the very bottom, by the way, by using our service, you agree never to join a class action or even never to sue at all. That's the mandatory arbitration cases. You know, most of us using our phones, using our computers, we are surrendering our right to sue for any reason ever in any court. All of those cases have to go individually to an arbitrator, usually before someone who was chosen by the corporation, by not a judge, but someone who, you know, again, is biased toward the corporation, usually in Delaware. So that, I mean, it's so perverted how this Supreme Court has been able to single-handedly, acting by itself, deprive us of really basic rights like access to justice that we had thought were secure for, like, really the first 200 years of the American experience.
So let's turn to Collins v. Yellen. This is a case that has maybe some short-term reason to celebrate, but long-term could be highly problematic. Tell us about this case.
Yeah, so this is a case that is a sequel to last year's SELA law decision, where the Supreme Court held that the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau can be fired at will by the president. Now, remember, when Congress created the CFPB, the whole deal was we need this to be independent. Like, we don't want the president to be able to interfere with the CFPB. But the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 vote, said, actually, we believe in the unitary executive theory that the president gets to fire anyone he wants within the executive branch. So we're not going to allow the CFPB director to be insulated from the president. Now, I think that was a really bad, wrong, stupid decision, but it did kind of pay off for liberals on January 20th when Biden fired Trump's CFPB director immediately, like during his inauguration, and replaced her with a liberal. That was a sort of good result from a bad decision. And I think Collins v. Yellen is a similar situation. So here we have another federal agency that is led by a single person. It's called the Federal Housing Finance Agency. And this is the agency that started regulating Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac after the bailout. It's kind of like a twin to the CFPB. And it holds Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at something called a conservatorship, which basically means that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have to give all of their money, all of their net income to the government in exchange for the massive bailout that it received back in 2008, which seems like a fair deal to me. Anyway, it's led by a single director, and the Supreme Court in Collins v. Yellen said, this too is unconstitutional. We cannot have federal agencies that are led by a single director who is shielded from termination by the president. Because this director is shielded from removal by the president, this is all unconstitutional. We're just going to fix the problem by giving the president this new power to fire the director of this agency, which is exactly what President Joe Biden did after the decision came down, and once again replaced the Trump holdover with another liberal.
And the idea was that those seeking redress wanted to say that the decision to put them in conservatorship and to inhibit shareholders from getting this money was inappropriate because of the way that the law was set up, that he was non-fireable. And the court just said, the fact that this guy was or was not fireable had no bearing on the validity of what decisions they made when they were hired or after they were hired.
Right. So the irony of this case, as you just explained, is that the shareholders filed suit because they wanted to blow up the FHFA. They wanted to end this conservatorship of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They wanted to force the government to put back about $140 billion into those companies, which would then go back to their, some of it would go back to their own pockets, right? Because they are investors in the companies. And their goal was to sort of blow up the housing market. And instead, what the Supreme Court did was say, actually, just because this guy can't be fired doesn't mean that everything he did was illegal. In fact, we don't think that anything he did was illegal. So we're going to let Biden replace him with a liberal, but we're not going to give the shareholders a dime, which means that these shareholders who are conservatives who wanted to blow up this agency ended up handing the keys to the agency over to Joe Biden, who will now be keeping Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on an even tighter leash than they were before.
So with all that said, let's do a hypothetical. This seems completely far-fetched, but can you imagine that after Joe Biden, you might get some really aggressively pro-business, let's say, or pro-banking president who might turn around and fire the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because they are cracking down on banks too much, or payday lenders or something like that, or we're going to, we're going to unleash Fannie and Freddie and maybe in some ways, allow them to backstop some very bad loans and create another financial crisis. I mean, I know that is fantastical, the notion that you could have a president come in who would be that irresponsible, but on day one would just simply do that. But that's the problem here, right?
Yes, that's exactly the problem. And, going beyond these two agencies, there's a lot of language in the court's decisions in these cases that suggests they're not only going to go after these single director agencies, that they're also going to go after agencies like the Federal Reserve and the FCC and the FTC that have historically been independent from the president for good reason, because we don't want partisan interference in the Federal Reserve. We don't want a massive economic shift in policy every time a new president comes in, or a president decides to lose his mind and stack a bunch of gold bugs onto the Federal Reserve. But with these decisions, I think the court has really effectively laid the groundwork for the next president to come in and not only fire the head of the CFPB and the FHFA, but also a lot of these other historically independent agencies that regulate the US economy that were supposed to be independent to keep everything stable. I strongly suspect that President Josh Hawley or President Tom Cotton are going to come in on day one and say, screw this, we're firing everyone, independent or not. The Supreme Court gave us the keys to the castle.
Yes, and I think President DeSantis would do that as well. But it seems to me, when you look at this, and you could even go back to the 2013 essentially, gutting of the Voting Rights Act. For a conservative judicial movement that has spent so much time pretending this is about judicial activism, which is, defined in their terms, the idea that, at the very least, that if Congress has spoken out about something, that you must respect it. Like, there is no room for the judiciary, except in those rare occasions where Congress passes something that is unconstitutional in some fashion. But generally, you defer if Congress has addressed it. Congress set up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in this way. Congress set up the FHFA in this way. This is all they reauthorized the Voting Rights Act. They determined that these credit unions, these credit reporting agencies are dealing with such sensitive information. You're dealing with the privacy of Americans, that Congress says, we're going to make some bright lines and you can't cross these, even if there's no provable damage in that very moment. It's a damage in and of itself. Like, we say that there's privacy rights. The court is rejecting all of, it seems to me, Congress's authority. And we're going to see it in terms of their ability to delegate things to agencies or to other institutions and say, we've decided this is the way it's going to work. And this is just coming down to literally 5 or 6 people who are going to determine, we know better how all of these things should work, not just in the absence of Congress addressing it, despite the fact that Congress has addressed it.
Yeah, and that's the sad irony of really all the opinions we've talked about today. The court accuses Congress of violating the separation of powers, but does not consider the possibility that the court itself is violating the separation of powers by intervening in a dispute between Congress and the executive, or Congress and somebody else, and saying, we know the rules and you don't. We're going to tell you how this works. You don't get to make this decision, we do. And I think it goes to show that the concept of judicial restraint, it's really been tossed out the window by today's conservative legal movement. Judicial restraint came into vogue as a response to the Earl Warren Court, as a response to Brown versus Board of Education and all of the liberal decisions from the 50s and 60s, where conservative judges basically said, we're in the minority, we've got to sort of stem this tide by saying judges should be modest, judges should be restrained. But today, they've got the power. Conservatives have a 6-justice majority on SCOTUS. They've got majorities on most of the courts of appeals in this country. And they've decided, why should we hold ourselves back? Why should we limit our imagination based on some abstract principle like judicial restraint? The truth is that as soon as they got in the driver's seat, they went up to 100 miles an hour. And I really don't expect them to stop, because frankly, I don't see the kind of backlash among the public that I think we would need to see to really scare the Supreme Court out of doing what it's doing.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's part of the reason why I wanted you on the show today to talk about this. We should also say, you mentioned the Warren Court. The Roberts Court has existed now longer than the Warren Court did, I believe. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Warren still may be, Roberts may be younger. Certainly, these other justices are younger by decades relative to what to the justices that consisted of the Warren Court. We're going to go through this era. We people in your profession still talk about the Warren Court. The Roberts Court is going to dictate the trajectory of this country for decades. Decades upon decades, it seems to me. And they're just constructing the trajectory. We're not even living the trajectory yet.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so ridiculous to see these opinion pieces that say, oh, the Supreme Court's surprisingly moderate. The Supreme Court's not as conservative as we thought. They are just beginning. They are just putting the pieces into place. Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh are still going to be on that court in the 2050s. A lot of Trump's judicial nominees will still be active judges through the 2060s. They were put on there when they were 33 or 34. They're going to be there there for the rest of our lives. And they are only just beginning to, as you said, kind of put into place the trajectory of the conservative legal revolution. So to take a few data points from this term alone and say, oh, well, Amy Coney Barrett didn't go as crazy as she could have, so this must prove she's a closet liberal, that fundamentally misunderstands the game that the conservative legal movement is playing here.
And I think that's a charitable estimation of what's going on with that. There's a lot of people who have a vested interest in maintaining a good relationship with the conservatives in the judiciary. I mean, because they're going to go in front of those cases, or they want to place students in clerkships under these judges, which enhances their career at as in law school professors. I mean, there's a lot of that. All right, so let's just look at the eviction moratorium, because this is one of those things that people are like, well, look, see how maybe not so harsh, but the implications of this, they're going to have real impact on people in the short term, but there's no structural issues that are being dealt with down the road for this, are there?
Well, so to back up, the eviction moratorium is currently in place because of a CDC order that rests on this really broad grant of power by Congress. Congress said, look, when there's a public health crisis, the CDC can do a bunch of stuff, a bunch of regulations that it couldn't normally do. And one of those the CDC has decided is to pause evictions, to say, you got to let people stay in their houses. There's a pandemic. This has been extended through July 31st by the Biden administration. But on Tuesday, the Supreme Court said by a 5-4 vote that it could stay in place through July 31st, but it could not be extended any further, and that it actually is illegal, but the court's going to let it be wound down so it doesn't create chaos. This is something Justice Brett Kavanaugh said. He wrote separately to say, I'm not going to side with the other conservatives because Barrett, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch would have ended it immediately, but Brett Kavanaugh comes in and says, I'm not going to end it right now, but I want you to know, CDC, that I think this is illegal. And if you try to extend it one more day, I'm going to step in and block it. And if you try to revive it, if the pandemic gets worse again, I'm also going to block it. And that's such a weird kind of relation between the branches of government. For the Supreme Court to act like a babysitter and say, CDC, I know that you're being naughty. I'll let you keep being naughty for a little while, but if you push the limits, then I'm really going to come crashing down on you. I don't think that's how judging normally works.
So, in other words, we're not a nation of laws. We're a nation of ask the moms.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think Kavanaugh knew he would get good press from writing this, from saying, I'll let the moratorium stay in place. I think he's pretty press savvy. But at the end of the day, he's also telling the Biden administration, you don't get to go any further than you already have. I'm the boss. I'm the mom, which again is just like a very weird way to run a court, in my view.
And it's also another instance where they're saying that Congress does not have the authority to suspend, this private debt collection in a state of emergency of some sort.
Yeah, so Kavanaugh flirts with the idea that Congress could pass an entirely new statute to reauthorize an eviction moratorium in the future. But I really suspect that if Congress tried to do that, that the court would step in and say, actually, you're delegating too much power. You're trampling on states' rights. We let you do this the first time, but we're not going to let you get away with it again.
Really disturbing. I don't know. Should we talk about the cursing cheerleader better? But it's fascinating because I think, you make this point about the public does not respond to the cases that we've just outlined that are going to have a dramatic impact on people's daily lives in ways that they can't even imagine and will probably be obscured from them. Right. Nobody's going to go wait a second, I can't get this car loan because TransUnion put me on this list. And Congress doesn't have the ability to restrict that. And I'm not going to get this car loan. And I'm going to spend the next 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, year, 2 years trying to fight this. They're not going to look back and go oh, well, it was TransUnion versus Ramirez. Because we have, it seems to me, an entire body politic, and I include the media in this, who either are willfully ignorant about this stuff or just don't perceive the ideology that is embedded in decisions like this.
Right. I mean, there's so much going on here, and I think you identified some of it when you noted that like the legal elites have a vested interest in not revealing to the public just how partisan and just how ideological a lot of these decisions are. I also think, you know, as I said before, like there's so much legalese here, and the court tries to make it even more confusing and incoherent. I really do think that sometimes the Supreme Court makes decisions more complicated than they need to be, so that the average person who doesn't have a law degree can't pick it up and understand. And I also think the media does not connect the dots from A to B and does not explain to people, you know, you are not able to exercise this right specifically because of this Supreme Court decision. There's actually an analogy to climate change here, you know, how the media often doesn't say, you know, these wildfires are due to climate change, they just happen and we report on them. There's a similar thing when awful stuff happens in this country and it can be attributed to court decisions. I mean, we've had mass shootings facilitated by court decisions blocking gun laws. And the media is too scared to say, this is because this judge let this mass shooter buy this gun. There's too much fear to just pin down the actual proximate cause of really bad stuff that's going on, because it's wrapped in legalese, because it's kind of complicated, and because there's a taboo against blaming courts for the consequences of their own bad decisions.
Well, folks can find the cheerleader stuff there. I don't have such a cheery mood right now. But Mark Joseph Stern, thank you so much for your time today. Very helpful and interesting and scary. And I hope people, it adds to people's understanding of the implications of the courts.
It's very nice to talk to someone who actually gets it. So thank you, Sam.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. And I should say that over the course of this morning, those two cases that Mark Joseph Stern referenced in terms of that were facing the Supreme Court today, one being a Voting Rights Act question coming out of Arizona. There were two state laws that prohibited people who were not the person who filled out their absentee ballot for handing it in. So, for instance, either maybe you're homebound and you can't hand it in and you just filled it out. You want to meet the deadline, somebody comes by to pick it up, or what they call ballot harvesting, which of course is really just people who are picking up ballots that have been sealed and filled out and brought back in. Also, I think some provisional balloting. The Supreme Court essentially ruled that they're going to ignore Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, or they're going to rewrite it. We will talk more in coming days about that ruling. Then in a separate ruling, which also just came down, this is the way they do it. Late June, early July is when a lot of the rulings are announced. 6-3 vote. Surprise, surprise. The Supreme Court, as they were looking, I believe the case is AFP, that's the Americans for Prosperity, versus California, although it may not be California. It could be the name of the Secretary of State there. Regardless, California had a law that required nonprofits to file a list of their donors if the donations were over $5,000 or represented 2% of the organization's total donations. The case was brought by the Americans for Prosperity Foundation, that is the Koch brothers. And it basically said, no, there's no obligation to disclose. If you go back to Citizens United, the whole argument that Anthony Kennedy had made was, well, at least we've got disclosure laws. And of course, that never worked out. And so that's where we're at, folks. People have asked me in the past, why do you harp on the Supreme Court so much? Because of rulings like this and the series of rulings we're going to have going forward with a 6-3 court. That fluky one where that fifth vote could go the other direction, We don't have that luxury anymore. It's 6-3. We'll talk about these cases and more tomorrow. If you're watching us on Peacock, we will see you then. And if you're watching us here, I am going to step out. I should just say the reason why we started today early was not because we wanted to strike fear in the heart of Steven Crowder or of Dave Rubin or Ben Shapiro or of whomever. Bongino. No, it was because I've got to go get what do they call it? An endoscopy? Something? I have acid reflux, and so I've got to go get an endoscopy, and I can't eat now, which is really the toughest part. But Matt Binder can eat, and that's why he's here. Binder will be here, as will Brandon Sutton.
Did you see the new invention that you can put wires on your teeth with a magnet that keeps your top and bottom teeth wired together for exactly your situation where you're not allowed to eat?
What?
Or a medical thing. It seems like scientists going a little bit too far. But it's
so that you don't have to exercise any will. You have your jaw. You have your jaw basically wired shut.
You literally can't do anything but a liquid diet.
I'm not even allowed to have liquid right now.
Oof.
I couldn't. I can't even have a glass of water. Right.
Rough.
Yeah, rough.
That's tough.
But when's the last time you ate?
I ate this morning like 15 minutes before I had to stop eating. So there it is.
That was a good move.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Support this program by becoming a member and join themajority.com. JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Matt Binder, since you're here, full of vim and verve today, you love dancing on the fact I can't eat.
Were you gonna say piss?
Right.
I was gonna say piss and pig. I couldn't figure out what it was.
I gotta say that Just Coffee sounds delicious right now. I can't wait to pour myself a nice cup of.
Bastard! Look at you with the haircut. Very fancy.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's what.
So, Matt, what's happening on Doom these days?
Well, tonight I will be at youtube.com/Matt Binder, and then later as a podcast at doomedcast.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. I will be walking through my recent piece about all of the cryptocurrency shady marketing schemes and outright scams that are currently perforating online among influencers. You've probably seen, especially if you're young, I'm sure your daughter has come across this. Big influencers on social media, big YouTubers, live streamers in the video gaming world especially, have been hawking all of these highly volatile altcoins, alternative cryptocurrencies, to their fans. Their fans have been buying into it. And then once enough people buy into it, it seems like the common case here is all the big holders of these coins sell off. Classic pump and dump. Yep. Leaving all these young fans of these influencers left holding the bag. I will walk through what's going on here and show you some examples tonight at youtube.com/Matt Binder.
A good friend of mine told me that her brother was walking his dog in LA at like one of the dog parks out there. And a dude who he maybe had met briefly at the dog park came up and was like, I want to give you some crypto, and gave him some crypto. The guy turned around and sold it for like $100,000. And then the whole thing collapsed afterwards. It was just basically, it's unbelievable.
There's a famous Joseph Kennedy Sr. story about the Great Depression, which is that he was walking in Manhattan or something like that, and somebody came up with a stock tip, and that's when he knew I need to sell, because if everybody just on the street is talking about this crap, it's definitely not smart money there.
Right. That tells you big bubble.
Yeah, once the influencers are telling you about it online, that's the goal. That's the message to get out if you're in, and to not get in if you're out.
It is extraordinary. But what a great currency that would be.
Right. But
Right.
Sam, didn't you hear that El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as one of its main currencies, an official currency? Obviously, that means it's the future. By the way, they're giving $30 in Bitcoin to every citizen of El Salvador to promote this, which sounds great until you find out that you can't actually exchange those $30 for real money if you're in El Salvador. You have to use them as Bitcoin. So if you're somewhere where they don't accept Bitcoin quite yet, or some other thing happens, like you don't have a phone to scan your Bitcoin transaction through, then you're out of luck. You know, that's not really helping you. Also, they have like a $150 million.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about this. Is this $150 like 150 million, or yeah, it must be million, like fund that's basically just to wash bitcoins, right? Like if you have a bunch of dirty Bitcoin, can you just cash it in, like, and basically use that fund to I don't understand this close enough, but that's what it seems like to me.
It's basically seems like a way for the government to quickly get the money to people who get Bitcoin and then want actual real physical money. Because in El Salvador, the only way to do that is to go to a Bitcoin ATM right now. And guess how many Bitcoin ATMs there are in all of El Salvador? 3.
Oh, so that's pretty good. Brandon Sutton, the host of the Discourse.
Hello, Sam.
How's what's in your Bitcoin wallet?
I am, I guess embarrassed to say that I don't understand things like Bitcoin and NFTs. So I've put all my money into Pokemon cards and other non-perishable goods. Things that appreciate over time, not things that, eventually just disappear when we don't have electricity. And if, in the future, in a post-apocalyptic society, all, dealing is going to be done in like trading card games like Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, Pokemon. And I'm prepared for that. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people are like hoarding gold, useless.
Yeah.
Useless. I will say though, honestly, when I was a kid, this is gonna make me sound old. They used to warn us about strangers handing out drugs, and that was like the big thing that was going to get you in trouble. Now it's crypto. It's crazy. I would way rather someone hand my child a dime bag full of any drug they could think of, rather than like, a bunch of dog coin or poon coin, whatever the new Elon Musk thing is.
I think he's got baby dog coin or something like that now, right? Or isn't there like a
right baby Doge? She tweeted about it this morning, and he doubled its value in like an hour.
Oh my god, just insane. All right, well, Matt, do you want to get in? Matt's going to place a bid.
No, Left Reckoning is on vacation. Griscom is out camping in Colorado, so I might do a Twitch stream tonight or tomorrow, depending on if I have date night tonight. So
whoa, all right.
So so twitch.tv/literary hangover. Check it out, and we'll be premiering a Milton Alamati talk on Walter Rodney tonight on the Left Reckoning YouTube page. So check that out, folks.
Griscom's out mining tulips. He's gonna. All right, folks. I leave you in good hands. A lot of material today. I already danced on Donald Rumsfeld's grave. I mean, I don't even get any joy that it is passed, because he sort of escaped any accountity.
Are you
in
familiar
his lifetime.
with TikTok challenges? They'll dances set to parts of songs.
Am I familiar? I haven't shown you the one I did with Mila a couple years ago.
We should start choreographing like TikTok challenges to like both the Crowder song, I think, if people want to do that.
Oh, that would be great.
Or like just to like announcements like Rumsfeld's death. We could do a little TikTok dance to that.
Yeah, that would be something. And of course, you guys are going to talk about, I guess, Meghan McCain is. Just go around the horn right now. Odds that she's got her husband has some new like digital channel that she's going to be on, or something to that effect.
I'm willing to do Hail Mary pass, and that she's going to get a legitimate like columnist gig somewhere. Maybe not maybe semi-regularly. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think that she got tired.
Job where she's going to have to write something every week.
It sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. I know how crazy it sounds, but you know what? Stranger things have happened.
That would be strange. I mean, I guess maybe she could have somebody who would write it for her, but she does not strike me as somebody who is like, what I really want to do is stop all this like celebrity stuff on The View, and I want to write something substantive every week. That would not. But
I like to take the long shot sometimes, Sam. I like to be the one on the fringes.
There you go. Well,
I think you're automatically assuming she's going to write something substantive. I mean, Barry Weiss's job doesn't seem all that hard. She could just go talk to some rich people at a college and talk about how terrible cancel culture is on the campus there.
As my dad used to say, and then that's the way she would start every column. What would Dad would Dad think? What's your guess, Matt?
Well, I think what are we guessing about, by the way? Just Megan.
What's her next career move?
Oh, I think she's going to defend her husband Ben Dominic as a POC, because Ben believes that because he has ancestors who colonized Cuba, that he is a person of color.
Okay.
So I think Megan is going to switch into that sort of lane.
Binder.
I don't know. Maybe she'll start a podcast.
There's no doubt she's going to start a podcast. That's part of the project. So I just said some type of digital media that her husband's probably going to set up or something.
Wait, do we think she's leaving The View?
Yeah, she is leaving The View.
Oh, I didn't see that.
She self-canceled. She got tired of them waiting for her, and she got tired of waiting for them to cancel her, so she just fired herself.
Did not think I was smart enough. I was canceled because people didn't take me seriously. I mean, she is going to. I haven't heard her goodbye tweet. That's what I used to say with the blogger. Back when the bloggers, it was like so long, cruel world, or something like that. There was a specific meme essentially for it. Essentially, that was, goodbye, cruel world. One of those posts where they basically say like, I'm not going to do this anymore, but it's your fault. So
she should just plagiarize what Barry Weiss said.
All right. To me, the more interesting thing isn't what Meghan McCain does next. The more interesting thing is who's going to be the next token conservative on The View.
You got any bets on that?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of who?
Kayleigh McEnany.
Well, I mean, I would say Rumsfeld, but he just died. So, it seems like an even longer shot.
Well, Rumsfeld's ghost, maybe.
Right.
That would be awkward. That would change the
nature
of The View.
Apparently. What? Yeah,
I'd watch it though.
What's Megyn Kelly up to nowadays? Nothing. I could picture that.
Oh, that's true.
Good point, actually.
It's a good guess. Well, I guess we're all going to have to wait. This is such exciting content to debate as to who's going to be the next person on The View. All right, guys. Good luck. Have fun in the fun half. I will see you folks tomorrow, Friday. Bye-bye.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Oh.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Back.
What is up, everyone? What a special show it is today. It's the boys. It's all the boys today. Just me and Brendan and Brandon and Matt, and I will finally, I swear to God, get Brandon and Brendan's names right. I don't know why it happens to me. I know who they are when they're separate. It's when they're together. The names just trip me up. I'm sorry, guys.
It doesn't bother me at all. You know, I can't be in a bad mood, frankly. I'm positively quivering with all the free testosterone in the air.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first show where it's just you and me, buddy, in terms of on-screen action here. I mean, it's almost like we're the NWO, the outsiders over here, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash invading the Majority Report.
Absolutely. You know, frankly, I will say it's about time. You know, longtime fan, and I'm glad to say I've not only dethroned God, I've now dethroned Sam. And you may be next, Matt.
Ooh.
Love that.
And then there would be, and then shades of NWO Black and White, and then NWO Wolfpack, I guess, right?
Was Hulk Hogan? I do not know as much about wrestling as you do. Apparently, I stopped watching in the early 2000s, basically when The Rock left. But was Hulk Hogan part of the NWO? Because I've been watching some of Hogan Knows Best, and that's a wild ride.
Yes, Hogan was the surprise third man back at Bash at the Beach, I believe 96, I want to say, where he turned out to be he turned heel for the first time in his career, at least as a major star, and joined Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. And he was always NWO until he went back to WWE years later. Still was NWO then, but then finally turned face in the early to mid 2000s and did a run with like the whole Hulkamania thing. And then, of course, we all know how he had a sex tape and sued Gawker, and Peter Thiel helped him out. And yeah. And that was and then he had the racist tape too. And then that was the end of Hulk Hogan pretty much. Even though the WWE's welcomed him back, he gets booed a lot now. People don't like him still. Rightfully so.
Well, you know what? There was a point in time where he was America's favorite hero, I suppose.
Hogan's hero.
I'm a real American. His theme song is
it's still
legit.
There's nothing that he's done since then that has invalidated that theme song. So I mean, it's fine.
The theme song will always, they say you could separate the art from the artist. Well, Hulk Hogan had nothing to do with that song other than him walking out to it. So that song should not be sullied because the dude walked out to it.
I used to have a Hulk Hogan little doll, stuffed doll thing that I used to beat the crap out of as a kid. That's wrestling.
I think they were.
I participated in that way.
I think they were called like Bash Buddies or Basham Buddies or something like that. I know what you're talking about because I had an Ultimate Warrior one.
I just time into the beanbag. Yeah, I fought that thing so much.
Yeah, good times. Well, Brandon, what do you think we should talk about first? Is there a specific clip you have any interest in, or should we go straight to the phones? What are you feeling today, buddy?
Well, you know what, Matt, since it's our first time alone, I would say, how about we go straight to the phones? Let's see if we have any callers.
All right, cool. Let's do this right now. And we do have callers. Let's go to the phone line is a little bit slow for me in terms of responding to my clicks. But let's go to 989. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Chris from Michigan. You guys hear me all right?
Hey, Chris from Michigan. I hear you. Brandon, Matt, do you guys hear him?
I hear him great.
Great, perfect. Go ahead. What would you like to talk about, Chris?
Well, first of all, I think you guys just need to admit that today's all-male host you're caving to the pressure from the men's rights activist guy that called last week and trying to give men the fair shake they finally deserve.
Oh, I missed that call. I have to go back and watch, but that's definitely what happened. I guarantee it. I mean, we obviously had to up the testosterone levels on this show, especially when it's, we got Sam out of here. Automatically, even if Emma was here and Sam gone, the testosterone levels are up. But but without anyone but me and Brendan and Brandon. Oh my God, I did it again. I'm sorry. But go ahead.
But yeah, on a serious note, I guess just wanted to make a quick comment about the other day when you had the guest on discussing the opioid epidemic and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted to mention that one thing that we have to keep in mind with this is look into the greater flaws of our system, both with lack of affordable health care and just the work yourself to death type mentality that we have. We think about the struggles of people during COVID, even trying to get sick time, to be off for a couple days or a couple, any amount of time to get off is a struggle. Now, if you're doing any kind of a manual labor job, or most jobs, where if you're in pain and you need to be able to function at work, well, the opioids are seen as a quick fix, even though they're not fixing anything. If it's a struggle to get a couple days off or having the flu or something, how are you supposed to be able to get time off to do multiple sessions of physical therapy a week for several weeks, where you're either risking losing your job and then losing insurance if you have it.
Right.
It's just it's something that needs to be considered in the greater debate. Not trying to justify or glorify opioids or anything, but just trying to say that it's the overuse part of it that can also be seen as being related to other flaws in our system.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think, Matt, you want to go ahead? I'm sorry. We're delayed a bit, I hear, but go ahead.
Yeah, like Johan Hari's book, Chasing the Scream, I think. Maybe that's the one on depression. I can't remember, but he has one on drugs too that makes that argument basically for the entirety of a book.
Oh my God. Sorry, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Please.
That's all I had to say.
I would say, something like that needs to be looked at in the in the context of how someone is like a medical condition or sick. But even that doesn't say enough here in this country, because even if you have like what's commonly seen by the public as a sickness or a disease, you don't get the time off. So that doesn't even do any good there either. But yeah, I think there's no, go ahead.
No, just jump in here real quick. I think, it's hard and basically it's impossible to separate our current healthcare paradigm from our neoliberal culture, generally speaking. And part of what that means is that our healthcare goes more towards increasing the productivity of our populace, making sure that enough people are able to keep working, that individuals who are sick are their symptoms that prevent them from working are masked in a way that allows them to allows the most work to be squeezed out of them for the least amount of money until they're burned out. We know that our system is designed or encourages like likely people to die before they reach the age where they can collect Medicare, they can collect Social Security. And so ultimately speaking, we're taught to overwork, we're taught to mask our symptoms, we're taught not to consider the complications that occur from working while sick, or even while working while contagious with illnesses, until the pandemic came about. And we were seeing the results of that, not only with the opioid epidemic, we're seeing the results of that with coronavirus, where this idea that, personal health is both disaggregated from public health, but also that personal health is merely a function of how much work you can churn out, how productive you are, is, not only killing people, it's killing us as a society.
Right. Thanks for the call, though, Chris. Anything else, or?
Yeah, exactly. Well said. No, that's it. I'll free up the line for another one.
All right, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. All right, let's go to another call, and then we'll go to a sound. Let's go to 570. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 570.
Oh, yes. This is Dave from Scranton. Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, hey, Dave from Scranton. What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, really quick before I make my point, Binder. Against all authority, punk band or ska band?
Against all authority, both punk ska band. If you got to take a real pick, they're a punk band with ska influence. They're not a ska band with punk influence.
Right. Yeah, I think they're one of the best punk bands. Them, Bad Religion. But all right. Yeah. To my point, great work when it came to Crowder with Sam and everything. But nuance is dead, and if the internet didn't kill nuance, it put it in the incinerator, pulverized the remains, and dug its grave. Both the left and the right were talking about the CIA woke recruitment video. Yes, the CIA is terrible and harmful, and it's great to call that out. But this is nothing new. Military government agencies have been appealing to all genders and races for decades. Especially after 9/11. Same thing with corporations as well, and it's also the same thing when it comes to these new sensitivity training teams, sensitivity training that so many on the right are complaining about. I saw dum-dums blaming Biden for unemployment cuts. He left it up to the states, which he shouldn't have had done, but it's actually the Republican governors that are cutting it, and not reporting the whole story just kind of shows the agenda, and we all know who the lying, pandering hacks are. Jimmy Dore has a video called mainstream media hit piece on YouTube, disagreeing how it radicalizes people, which we know it's true. Dore knows it's true. This is the guy that interviewed Caleb Kane, but that's when he censored Sam's name. Dore's in the same company as Crowder, Rubin, and other people that won't mention his name. Hell, Dore just backed his idea about talking to Boogaloo Boys. He just had his Dave Rubin moment, saying how he just wants to talk about ideas. And it's not just Dore. There's many others that lie about.
Did he bring up the Boogaloo Boys again since early January?
Yes, go on.
Did he say something recently about that?
Yeah, I just saw another video about it where he's talking about how, we need to talk to all people instead of not just the leftists, the progressives, people that are on our side, the socialists. We need to talk to everybody. And he also bragged about still going on to Tucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson's anti-war is his line. It's ridiculous.
Here's the thing. And the Dore people usually miscategorize my views on this as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking to everybody. There's nothing wrong with having on whoever you want on your show, or going on whatever show you want to go on, or just, I have no problem with that at all. The point is, what is the purpose of it? If the purpose of having a right winger on your show is to promote their views and let them talk it up as something great without any pushback, then that's wrong, in my opinion, if your point isn't to promote those views. It's that simple. You could talk to whoever you want, but what is the purpose of the conversation?
Exactly. Right. Katie Halper and Matt Taibbi were talking about having Rudy Giuliani on their show, and not to call out Rudy or the Trump administration out for their crimes and their incompetence, but to actually promote them. And it would be good for him to come on their show, So Like,
Well,
why
I
have
don't
Rudy
know about
on
that.
your show at all? If you're,
Right.
you know.
I mean, listen, if they want to have
But,
Giuliani on
yeah,
their show,
and, you know,
again, and I'm sure it would be great for their show. Absolutely. I don't think there's anything really wrong with pointing that out. But again, what are they going to talk with him about when he's on there? Are they going to completely try to get something out of him, to try to, hold him to account for the whole nonsense he went through to put the election under scrutiny, unwarranted scrutiny? I mean, are they going to nail him for his unabashed support of Trump's big lie, or are they just going to have him on and talk up whatever? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I don't know if it's happened yet. It's the first I'm hearing of this particular thing. But again, my point is, have on whoever you want. But what is the purpose of the conversation? That's the real point to me. And to your main point, the nuance thing, I absolutely agree. In fact, last night, one of my tweets made it to Tucker Carlson's show. Apparently, I've not seen it. People sent me the screenshot, and
oh, really?
Yeah. And what I gotta say, either Tucker's audience really does not care about the New York City mayoral race, or Tucker's audience is a lot less engaged, because I really didn't get much response from his viewership for this. But basically, what I saw
But
this
it's
too.
not, just really quick, it's not.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's just not like people and guests. It's, news reports and talking points. Like, people not talking the full story about Biden's immigration. We know it's not great, but, we know it's far better than, Trump's by far. When it comes to Fauci and his emails, a lot of people on both sides, and I'm mostly calling on the left because that's what I'm a part of, not telling the full story about the emails, taking things out of context, misrepresenting what people say were meant at the time. You know what I mean? And, now you have Doors Yes Men, just really quick, Doors Yes Men, Ron Pacone attacking Tom Hartman, of all people, on Twitter. But,
I mean,
that's
I can tell you right now, as someone who looked through those Fauci emails, the vast majority of them, and has written about them. The interesting thing in there is getting a behind the scenes look at what the head of the response to the COVID pandemic was dealing with and going through. And I don't mean this, as sympathetically. I mean, we can see what he went through, the mistakes he
undermined.
made, the mistakes he made, which there are mistakes he made in getting information out to the public. We get to see. What's interesting to me is how responsive he was to anyone and everyone who who sent him an email. But in terms of there being some sort of big unveil in there, like some big eureka moment in there, there is nothing of the sort. In fact, all the emails that are passed around as some big bombshells by the right especially, and by those on certain factions on the left, all those emails that are considered bombshells are emails that were sent to Fauci from complete nobodies. One of the major emails that were being sent around was an email claiming that they had the recipe to make COVID-19. And what it was some COVID conspiracy theorist who runs a COVID conspiracy website where he sells COVID merch called COVID Candy. And the guy basically copied and pasted an old scientific report from, I believe it was either like the late 1990s or early 2000s, that had absolutely nothing to do with COVID-19. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's nothing that people are turning nothing into something just because they hear that emails were released. Like, that's the thing. People don't understand what they're talking about. They assume emails released must be some crazy information, and there must have been some sort of hack, which also is not true. Those were released due to a Freedom of Information Act request. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I mean, after the Freedom of Information Act, they gave out those emails that, of Biden or Fauci or anybody wanted those still classified, they would be. Okay. And same thing with the Wuhan virus leak theory that's out there. And there's really still no evidence that it did. I mean, it's possible, but, again, not to tell both sides of the story just annoys me so much, especially when you're supposed to be a leftist progressive commentator on the story,
Thank you for the call.
Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Take care, Dave. What I was saying about the Tucker thing is basically what happened in New York City was they released an unofficial tally of the ranked choice voting results for New York City mayor. And what happened was in the original unofficial tally, again, unofficial, these weren't the finalized results. There's still even 120 something thousand absentee ballots yet to be counted. But in the original unofficial tally, they accidentally added 130,000 some odd test ballots. Complete mess up, absolutely rake the New York City Board of Elections over the coals for this. They deserve scrutiny, obviously, but mistakes do happen.
Especially here.
Yeah. And people, when they heard this, they didn't realize that was what happened. All they saw was, and I'm included in this, all they saw was a number of pundits, left, right, and center, also saw this and said the same thing. When Eric Adams put out his original response, he was to that. It seemed like he was calling into question the entire election to some people at first, because he had already hinted he was going to do that before election day. Even he had already hinted that ranked choice voting was going to possibly cost him the election, and that it was, and his campaign was calling the actual legal process in New York City, how voting actually works now in New York City, ranked choice voting, they were calling it racist because it was going to undermine his voters' will, which is not the case. Ranked choice voting makes it so no one's vote ever gets thrown away, depending on who they vote for. You can vote for whoever you want and still rank other people who could have a better shot. And, you know, if your first choice doesn't make it, your real choice doesn't make it because, you know, they never really had a shot to begin with, maybe your next choice gets your vote too. And then it keeps going down the line until you've exercised all your ranked choice options. To me, it's the best possible way to make sure every single vote counts. But, you know, they had a problem with that. So that's what a lot of people thought they were talking about. But now, the reason my tweet was featured on Tucker Carlson's show is the right wing is using what happened and Adams's complete questioning of the entire election. And I saw this in my own replies because Michael Tracy tweeted about it too, calling my tweet out. Trump supporters are using what happened in New York City to claim, see, there was election fraud there. They were trying to cost Eric Adams the election, which is not true. I'll get to that in a second. So that means Trump has to be right too. There's fraud everywhere, all across the country. Trump actually must have won. Well, here's the funny thing. New York City actually put out the corrected results yesterday without those 130,000 test ballots. And the race is even worse for Eric Adams because the test ballots didn't really wait too much on Adams. The test ballots mostly gave votes to candidates who had no chance to begin with, and it didn't go down the alley and affect the main contenders, who at this point are Eric Adams and Catherine Garcia and Maya Wiley. 400 votes separate Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia from that second place to see who would go up against Adams. And then between Adams and Garcia's in second right now without the absentee ballots counted. Between Adams and Garcia, there's about 15,000, I think even a little bit less votes between the two of them. Again, 120 some odd thousand absentee ballots still out. Eric Adams is far from guaranteed to be the mayor of New York right now. In fact, it's looking really good for Catherine Garcia if she's able to beat Maya Wiley in that second to last round when the absentee ballots come in.
No, absolutely, Matt. And, you know, thanks for that catch up on the New York City race, because despite living here, it's been a little bit difficult for me to follow. But I did hear about the test ballot thing. And I think, you know, it's actually funny because I was having a conversation with somebody, about the litigation going on from the Trump campaign and, you know, at the various state levels and whether or not they're going to find anything, you know, evidence. And, you know, my position was I would not be surprised if they found some irregularities at any level of our electoral system, from local elections to national ones, because as many people have documented, we have a very, very bad electoral system, both infrastructure. And so it's easy when there is somebody who's operating in bad faith, because we ignore the people who are operating in good faith, pointing this stuff out. You know, if for someone operating in bad faith and therefore being given media attention that people operating in good faith do not get, to go, ha ha, do you see, look at all of this bad stuff that's occurring in our electoral system. It's like, yes, but not for the reason that you're saying. It's like, yeah, unfortunately, when you have a system that's full of holes, it also makes it very rife for tampering with. But no one's interested in fixing those holes. They're just, interested in complaining about the specific instance of tampering. And so, yeah, that in many ways empowers the right wing and empowers people to point to problems that we know exist for different reasons and go, well, why isn't anyone talking about this? And the reason is because the people who are talking about it are also implicating capitalism, are also implicating the private companies that get rich via these, holes in our infrastructure, the politicians who benefit from it. And so to complain, to point out a specific instance where this thing that undermines the public's faith in the electoral system happens, it's like, well, yeah, but they shouldn't have as much faith in it as they do, because it's just not very good. So having faith in a faulty system doesn't really benefit anybody.
Right, absolutely. And the interesting thing specifically about the New York City race is Adams is by far, like, I know it was a big a lot of candidates, so there wasn't really a clear establishment choice. But if you're going to pick one, Eric Adams is the establishment choice. Why would they try to undermine him by like throwing in fake ballots when he's the guy they most likely want? I mean, he's currently the Brooklyn borough president. He is the only person who is in this race who is formerly a Democratic New York State senator. He has the backing of the current mayor, Bill de Blasio. De Blasio's candidate is Adams. I mean, you don't get any more crystal clear in terms of who if they're going to be an establishment pick, it's Adams in this. So who is trying to undermine him by sneaking in ballots to? Well, it's just ridiculous.
The left, Matt, because Adams represents the perfect intersectionality of marginalized identities, Black person and cop. And so, for those of you who don't know Adams's origin story, he was beaten by a cop as a teenager. And I guess there's like werewolf rules in that part of Brooklyn or whatever. So like if you get beaten by a cop, you just transform into one or some, shit. And, that really, like, candidates like Adams who are, some of the things he said are just out of this world, like troubling. They fit into a very, very specific niche, the same one that Kamala Harris was trying to fit in, but didn't really work at the national level because, no one knew who she was. That this idea that there's going to be this intersection of marginalized person with the system's legitimacy that's going to like usher us into this new age of neoliberal glory. We're going to put the right person in the right place. And so it's easy for people to believe that kind of like narrative that underlines a lot of our society, that the left is secretly racist and that's why they hate this Black cop and all this, blah, blah, blah. But, at the end of the day, the electoral system is the one that electoral system and our lack of investment in it, both from a sociological and infrastructural standpoint, is what's like hampering our ability to get most things done, and allowing that to go on while selectively allowing people in positions of power like Eric Adams or like, Tucker Carlson to selectively highlight little bits of like the faults that it has that, negatively or seemingly negatively impact them is, it's just where we are. It's where we are because we lack a sort of, platform as big as theirs to point out that no, you're just, you're selectively highlighting a very small part of this like monster, but there's also just there's an entire Kraken attached to it, essentially.
Right. And to that point of highlighting like specific, I mean, even on the, speaking specifically at the New York City mayor's race, you see from the right, they're using Adams to sort of tack on their own beliefs that this is clearly his success. And you see this from pundits too, centrist pundits at big outlets too. This is clearly his success in this race, which again is not even guaranteed at this point, and is looking actually pretty bad for him because the absentee ballots are mostly going to come from Manhattan, it appears, which is the one borough that Garcia actually beat Adams in. But
I'm holding out for Yang.
The funny thing is Yang's support. Now, people outside of New York don't know this. In ranked choice voting, it helps to be friendly to your competitors who you can see who you can see as their supporters voting for you as one of their choices. Yang and Garcia had a pact where they would, well, Yang was telling his supporters to vote for Garcia second. Garcia honestly didn't return the favor to Yang. Actually, she appeared at the conference to take the endorsement from Yang as the second choice, but she didn't do the same with her supporters.
Well, I mean,
Wiley was leading Garcia in all the voting until Yang gets eliminated. And then all of his vote, well, not all of them, but a substantial amount of Yang voters did rank Garcia second. And that's what helped Garcia get over the line to beat Wiley for that second place to face Adams. So Yang sort of did become a kingmaker in that sense if Garcia actually wins.
It sounds like he was tricked. Good. That's the kind of strategizing you like to see, politics aside, agnostically, that's the kind of thing you like to see. Yang is not a real candidate. He's a meme candidate, and he's always been a meme candidate. Oh, I will update people. Apparently, people were wondering what happened. There's a mouse in my apartment, and I just noticed it, and it surprised me a little bit. But don't worry, it's very cute. I'm going to capture it and probably release it. I'll probably capture it and release it. Oh, I see it. There it is again. It's so cute. I'll probably capture it once we are done here and, name it Leonard and release it out into the wild.
I honestly can't tell because I believe that you're that type of person, but also your reaction to the mouse. I'm not quite sure if you're actually going to be so kind to it. Honestly, I can't tell which side of you.
Frankly, I'm always ready for combat, Matt. And so like when I saw a blur out of the side of my vision, I'm like, okay, it's go time. Now I know it's just like a mouse, which I can like visibly see. It's like, okay, that's fine. I've lowered my defenses.
Well, right, because you seem I saw your reaction. You seemed like someone who would have a kindly reaction to wildlife, but then your reaction also made me think you might be one of those people who's like, "Not in my house. Get the fuck out."
I mean, I can be startled.
True.
It's just a mouse, though.
So, Brandon, I went on that whole little monologue with that caller before. Why don't you take the reins now? Why don't you go with a clip or a topic you want? And because I want to, I don't want to be a mic hog here.
No, I appreciate you helping me out while I was dealing with my wildlife problem. I feel like I'm an episode of the Boomafoo. Why don't we started with Sam in the Meghan McCain thing, so that was an option. How about we start with the Trump rally and Trump saying he's to 2024 run?
Let's do it.
Have to ask, where are you in the process of, let me ask you this without giving the answer what the answer is, have you made up your mind?
Yes.
I think you got it right. Yeah.
What? What? They cheered that he made up his mind, but he didn't say what that is. I mean,
which is like also just colossally stupid to not like if you actually made up your mind. I remember like this may be a little bit far field, but when LeBron was going to decide which team he's going to, they literally don't know until things fall into place, right? Like you reserve, Trump said he made up his mind, but if something happens that's catastrophic, he won't run. If something happens that's really good, he will run. To actually have made up your mind would be just colossally stupid. And it's funny that he's like posturing as if he has just because he knows that's what his crowd just wants decisiveness, basically.
Right.
Well, yeah, you gotta.
No, go ahead, Brent.
I was gonna say, yeah, you gotta build up excitement. Otherwise, people are gonna start tuning out. Like, I mean, he's blown past the deadline where he was supposed to be back in the presidency. That was 6 months ago at this point. If he's not going to pivot towards the 2024 run as part of his media platform tour, what else is he talking about?
Well, he is going to be doing a winter tour, I believe, with Bill O'Reilly.
Oh.
So he does have some plans. In fact, upon hearing that, a lot of QAnon faithful got really disappointed because the belief that they are now latching on to that Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy theory that Trump is going to be back in the presidency. He's going to be the president once again in August. And so once that Bill O'Reilly tour was announced, they got very upset because if Trump's the president again in August, how would he have the time to go on a talk talking tour with Bill O'Reilly. So they were very disappointed that it seems unlikely now that that Trump won't be president in August.
It seems like it'd be better for him to like just stay off of tours like that and then let the crazies do his work for him and just imagine what he's doing. Because I feel like a Bill O'Reilly tour, that's gonna be sad. Like it's gonna land like his From the Desk of Donald Trump stuff. No one really cares about it when it's so.
He's lost his juice, man. He doesn't have the fastball right now. He needs his Twitter account. I think he'll go campaigning to just get his Twitter account back, basically.
I think it's like Matt
I don't
said.
think. Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's no chance of him getting his Twitter account back, according to Twitter. That's not even like an option. Like Facebook is the one that said, we'll give it back to you perhaps in like a 2-year span. If like,
presidential campaign where he threatens Twitter the whole time and has his entire hooting mob behind him. I don't know.
Oh yeah. I mean, I agree. It's definitely possible. But at this point, Twitter's the one platform who said that there's no reversing that. So if he if he thinks he's going to get something back, he should go for the more realistic option. And
well, that's why he was the president and you weren't, Matt.
Right.
You got bigger vision.
That's true.
I don't know. I don't think he had it in him to sort of like drop off into the background. Before president, he was doing the apprentice thing. And then they took that from him because he wouldn't drop the birther thing. And then the president thing was just supposedly going to be another part of that return to fame. And now he's even less famous. Well, he's infamous now, but he has even less access to platforms than he did going into being president. And so trying to figure out how to get back to that point, maybe 12, 13 years ago when he was on television, a fixture of late night television is probably going to be the rest of his life's goal. Now, running for president in 2024 might be the easiest route to that again. But the idea that he specifically wants to be president, I don't know about. Everyone was talking about him running for it in 2024. I mean, if that helps him get a contract for a new reality television show, maybe. But I think you could, simulate him leaving by offering him another media adjacent role that just has some level of prominence.
Right. It's crazy he hasn't actually started his own social media platform yet. Like the guy clearly could do so. He doesn't have to pay anyone. There's enough people who love him so much they would do it for free. I mean, Parler, did you see that news that came out about Parler? We previously knew that Parler reached out to Trump and wanted to give him monetary compensation in terms of a big stake in the company back after he was deplatformed from Facebook and Twitter earlier this year. I think actually they wanted to give him that stake when he was still president. But this came out after he was deplatformed. But this just came out recently that not only did that happen, as part of the deal, not only did Trump want that stake, he wanted a guarantee from Parler that they would ban any of his critics from the platform, and Parler would not agree to that. And that's one of the reasons the deal fell apart. So the guy who the free speech advocates love so much wanted his critics on another social media platform silenced if he was to join it.
Do we know what he was worried about?
I don't know if there were any specific. I'm not sure. Gab's owner came out and said that there was an attempt to, and again, you can't really trust Andrew Torba, who knows but he came out and said, according to him, there were some sort of talks to get Trump on Gab a while back, but then Jared Kushner got involved and wanted any people who were talking badly, wanted the anti-Semitism and the anti-Israel stuff off of Gab. And remember, Gab is a hardcore platform for literal anti-Semites and neo-Nazis. So Kushner is not completely out of bounds to think that stuff is gross, obviously. Well, he wanted that stuff taken off, and obviously Gab was not going to allow that. That's their bread and butter. So Trump didn't end up joining there either.
Well, yeah, I know. I can understand that. Trump has, and I think he's always had displayed this level of disgust for his most radical, far right, most stereotypical followers. When he had coronavirus and apparently was dying, he giving a drive-by wave or any of those sort of like disrespectful moves that he likes to do, referring to them basically as garbage after the Jan 6th insurrection. I believe he thinks of them that way, honestly, I think mostly what it is that he's endemic of a certain type of right-winger person who would never be satisfied on Gab or anything else because, part of their, ideology, part of what they want is to be integrated into a larger society that is just forced to deal with their, terrible, terrible, unpopular ideas. And, if you sort of broach the topic that like, hey, you know what? We're a society, laws, etc. aside, just as a group of people, if all of us don't like you, you can't hang with us. People like them get a little bit upset. That's why a lot of right-wing articles are just like, can you believe how hard it is to date in DC? Why aren't people who don't like us being forced to deal with us? And it's like, well, because at the end of the day, people still have the right to ignore you if you don't necessarily, fit their type of, social norms, worldview, if you're offending them because you're like sort of, bigoted against their very existence. And, there are legitimate neo-Nazis, people who are self-identified Nazis who love being on places like Stormfront and Parlor because they get to be surrounded by people who are like them. And then there are people like Trump, like, the Laura Loomers of the world who think better of themselves and think they should be allowed into polite company despite their views being more aligned with the people on Gab than they on Parlor than they are with the people on Twitter or at, the New York Times or just in any sort of nice, polite university. And they can't understand why everyone is not getting riled up about the person that they don't like being kicked out of the party. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, people have to like you a little bit. People, like, and part of that is not like calling for them dying to defend you. And that's, that's just the reality. So, Trump, if he goes to Gab, it would have to be a heavily curated platform to make sure that it made him feel as comfortable as possible. But even then, he still would never be as active or enjoy it as Twitter because it's not full of people who are literally being forced to deal with him talking trash about them.
Right. That's absolutely it. A lot of them, I would even say the vast majority, because, even like the people who like to be around like-minded people like the neo-Nazis and the anti-Semites and white supremacists, they got their private Telegram channels where they talk more openly about things to do that. But like when they're on a social platform, you definitely hit it on the head. They want to, piss off the libs. They want to get people angry. And you can't do that when you're on Gab or Parlor because there's no libs there.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be a struggle. And, we can talk about the free speech implications of being banned from Twitter if you want. But at the end of the day, what they want is not free speech. What they want is the right to harass people or to, put their finger as close to their sibling as possible and go, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. And then the fact that we're not children, we're adults who are allowed to make adult decisions. And, you break that finger, they get upset. And they go, but I was not touching you. It's like, okay, well, yes, you were. It's like, that's, we're not playing that game. And there's a resistance, I think, to people, that's all analogy, obviously, but there's a resistance, I think, from people who have been predominantly socialized online, who have found a lot of their kinship online, to the idea that the rules that exist online, or like sort of the informal rules that exist online, like if you make somebody mad, they like, you win that argument, don't exist in real life. Like if you make somebody mad, if you make everyone mad at your job, everyone doesn't congratulate you for being an epic troll. They like, they call you into HR and they say you can't sexually harass people or say racist jokes. And that's what people rebel against. And it's, it's a little bit vacuous.
Right. Let's go to the phones and then we'll hit up another clip or two. 847. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Finn from the Burbs.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Brandon. This is Finn.
Tim?
Finn.
Finn?
Finn.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't really. Hey, Finn, what was up to talk about today?
Hey, I only got a second, but I wanted to bring a couple factoids to you guys.
Go ahead.
The first is that some internet spoofs found on IMDb that there's this movie that came out in 2009 called The Velveteen Rabbit.
Oh, yeah, I saw this, and Crowder's in it, right?
Yeah, he's a credit for Baseball Boy #1.
Right. I gotta watch it just to see what baseball
And
boy
I
number
also
one is.
saw, I mean, if you want to subject yourself to watching that and share with us, that would be great.
I mean, it's a little tacky to reference
second
yourself.
thing.
Right. Go ahead.
The second thing was, do you remember a couple months ago when Crowder was having he was watching Democracy Now! For some reason, right? About the black farmers.
Right. I think I recall this. Go ahead, though.
That ring a bell. Actually, like in that, he's actually Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Well, what was he doing?
That
You
whole
broke up
bit
a
where
little
he's
bit.
doing where he was doing like a AAVE kind of like minstrel show bit.
Yeah,
I didn't see this.
It's like literally like word for word a rip off of Curb.
Oh, really? Oh, he's
Crowder,
he's a joke thief too.
He has a lot of bits, but really they're just like poorly thought out characters. Like I think doesn't he have one that's just like an Asian delivery guy or something? It's all really lowbrow stuff like Mad TV circa 2002, like the worst sketches stuff.
Honestly, it's like Breakfast at Tiffany's.
All right, caller. Thanks for. Was there one last factoid, or was that pretty much it?
No, that was it. Guys, have a great day.
Got it. Thanks, Finn. Take care.
I will not be watching Velveteen Rabbit.
Yeah, I mean, I got 2 kids. I'm sure it's a decent kids movie. Maybe I'll throw it on if it's on a streaming service that I subscribe to already. 703. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hey, what's up? You're on the air.
Oh, sweet. This is Mark from Northern Virginia.
Hey, Mark from Northern Virginia. What would you like to talk about today?
Oh, yeah. I was just calling to see if I could respond to Sam's sort of answer to selling Medicare for all to conservatives.
Sure. Was this a recent? Because
I realized, yeah.
I'm not sure what his. I think this might be better to do in Sam's here.
Day to go.
But go ahead if you want. You're on the air now, so go ahead.
Yeah. I didn't think it was like a bad idea or anything. I just think it wouldn't like catch on as well to say that, hey, Medicare, it's really popular for a lot of people. You ever met someone on Medicare who didn't like it? And I think that's not really the appeal you have to go for with working class conservatives. You can't do that with upper middle class conservatives because they're in a bubble. You know that? They're practically insular to any sort of talking points. And if you go about it saying, hey, Medicare, it works for a lot of people, and they'll be just like, well, it's a government institution. Of course, they're going to bring up a fringe case or some sort of lazy statistic or outdated statistic. You hear me?
Right. So what did you think? Did you have was this just a rebuttal to his, or did you have your own idea?
Yeah, I had my own idea, and it's sort of summarized as a common man's dialectic, if you will. It's just say look, you're still paying Medicare tax, whether you like it or not. Now you have a card. You can just use it for your ENT or your regular physicals. You don't have to worry about and you'll still probably have your private health insurance because you love capitalism so much. It's doing so much for you. Without that sarcastic jargon. But basically, I'm saying downplay Medicare. Yeah, just downplay Medicare for all. Just say it it's going to be in your wallet. Just try it.
That's interesting. I can see where you're
moreover,
coming from
just
here. Just focus on the Medicare they already have.
In terms of rhetoric.
All right.
Yeah.
What do you say to them when they
innocuous
Go ahead, Brendan.
What do you say to them? Well, what's it going to cost then? Like, that would be the first question I would think of a conservative asking.
I mean, you say to them, it's already costing you. You're already paying Medicare.
I could see that working for some.
And
I could
it's
see that
sort
working
of like,
for some.
yeah, and I can't cite like what sort of copay like Medicare is going to involve. I can't imagine like a future with Medicare for all that doesn't involve like an arbitrary copay.
Yeah, of course.
But I just say like don't present like Medicare for all as this, oh, now this is the only healthcare you have. There's no way in hell we're getting to Medicare for all and abolishing private healthcare at the same time.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
So it's yeah. So I'd say like the strategy is to working class conservatives, because I don't think they're necessarily opposed. They see it's a government institution and not some sort of like public service that can be there at all times. You kind of just sort of downplay it and present it as this sort of thing you can have whenever. You're already paying for it.
What do you think, Brandon?
I mean, I wonder, right? I wonder how we talk to people about Medicare for all, because I think if coronavirus demonstrated one thing, is that people in America are taught to have a very dysfunctional relationship with the healthcare system. A lot of people are alienated from their bodies. A lot of people feel, rightly so, anxious about interacting with doctors. And I think part of that creates this barrier we have with people expecting or demanding the right to healthcare be presented to them. Part of the reason it becomes a conversation about how much it costs is because people don't really see it in their own real life as something I think that is, necessary, mandatory part of, just an everyday average, rather part of a productive and the sort of holistic and personally fulfilling way, and not sort of like the capitalist way. Going to the doctor, having a positive relationship with healthcare professionals, mental, dental, etc., as being part of having a happy life. When you talk to people about healthcare, even agnostically from politics, young people will tell you they're fine with their insurance because they haven't had a sufficient enough interaction with it yet. Knock on wood, if they're lucky, to show how dysfunctional that system is. And by the time people do have that kind of dysfunctional interaction with it, they're put in debt. How many people's first, I wonder, interaction with the healthcare system is them being put into severe medical debt when they thought they were covered. And then, once you're in that point, the system is, or rather our political media system is more than ready to write you off as not having done your own homework or done your own due diligence to sort of, gotten the right output from the system that would have technically been possible, even though it's geared against you. So, I mean, to answer the caller's question, I'm not sure what line of rhetoric specifically will work to convince people that they deserve Medicare for all, because I think what we've seen with the pandemic is people, even when you tell them stuff is free, they don't believe you. They don't want to go to the doctor because you tell them it's free, but there's such a lack of healthcare infrastructure that maybe that message is not being fully, delivered to whoever's administering the shot. So they're still trying to take insurance cards and people don't have insurance, and it's all very confusing. And, no one is really working to fix those things. They're just trying to rhetorically convince people that like Medicare for all would help. And I agree that it would help on the front end, but I mean, I wonder how we work towards the back end, like getting people to feel like they are in fact entitled to something as necessary for life as healthcare, that is not optional. It's not optional for a happy life, and therefore it's something they deserve, if that makes sense. Doesn't answer the question, but I mean, that's where I'm at. Like, people just don't feel like they deserve healthcare or need it. And, you would imagine that coronavirus would have changed that, but there are agents out there who are making it seem like, well, if you're young enough and you're healthy enough, it's just like getting the cold. You don't need to go to the doctor for a cold. It's like, well, people die from the flu every year because they don't go to the doctor.
Right. No, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Thanks for the call.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's well, yeah. Thanks for calling. Thanks for letting me speak.
Would you like to make one more point? I feel like the delay cut you off a bit. Do you want to make one more point? Nope. Okay.
Yeah, one more point.
Okay.
I'd say the biggest hurdle I feel not just isn't the sentiment against government and healthcare. come on, like government doesn't give a shit about public sentiment, for sure. It's sort of, and I'm kind of citing like David Graeber's bullshit jobs here is like when Obama said, like, think of the millions of jobs that I'll be like making obsolete with the option of socialized medicine, to something to that effect. And it's sort of like the biggest hurdle is sort of all the clerks, all the clerical staff that involves itself with the private healthcare industry. Unfortunately, like you have to either co-opt that entire army of like pencil pushers, to put it in a derogatory state, towards helping Medicare, like clerically, administratively,
Right.
or just insert like an entire Medicare staff in every hospital and clinic. Now that's huge. That's a what's the term? That's a personnel problem at that point.
Yeah, I hear you.
So it's like on two fronts. Like you have to convince the conservative public to like not think of Medicare for all as this invasive thing or this cynical thing to take cynically. You also have an administrative staff to sort of either convert over to your public service or subtly make irrelevant over time.
Thanks
But
for the
that's my
call.
instinct anyway.
That's a great point. I mean, I think that the caller, just to echo what he was saying there at the end, is right, that we don't, the public services aren't allowed to advocate for themselves in the same way private services are. The U.S. Postal Service doesn't get to like, inundate you for financial reasons and other reasons with like millions and millions of ads about how much better they are than the UPS. But while UPS can, basically put ads wherever they want. And so what we also have is a political media culture full of politicians and I would say journalists and pundits who don't necessarily do the job that they're supposed to be doing of advocating for the public sector the way that it needs to be advocated for. Like, cheerleading that, neoliberalism has told you that the public sector can't do anything better than the private sector can. But in fact, there are some things that only the public sector can do and the private sector should have no part in them because you know what? They should be human rights. And, I think we've been very, very heavily alienated from our own human rights to the degree where even the things that theoretically are promised to us in the Constitution, people find themselves arguing back and forth over. And the only time you really hear about the Constitution is when we're trying to decide whether Nazis should have like a $2 million contract on MSNBC in the primetime slot. And, so it all just becomes
That's my favorite part of the Constitution.
It is the only part, the part where it says like, if you are saying hateful things in order to promote a book or like podcast, that you get extra free speech. That's in the Constitution. Right. That's in the Bill of Rights, the first part. Like if you're not allowed to scream fire in a crowded theater unless fire is the name of your podcast. And, it's the, and you're also just doing it to raise
bonus.
You get a free speech bonus. You're doing it to raise awareness for the cause. But no, I mean, I agree with the caller. I think that a better example, because you don't really hear it so much outside of Obama saying it about socializing medicine would leave a whole segment of the population unemployed. But you hear it all the time about like the coal industry. Like if we move from fossil fuels to, alternative energy, that it's going to leave segments and segments of our country unemployed. And I think that, it doesn't give enough, or rather, people don't give enough legitimacy to the fact that that is a real concern for segments of our post-industrial hellscape society, that their politicians, that their, local senators, state senators would allow for jobs or et cetera to go away, sort of an agnostic sense from their community, jobs to be like leave their community, allow for resources from the government to be stripped away and for nothing to come in to replace them. Because like, that's just Reaganism, that's just Clintonism, that's just Obamaism. And so like, appealing to this idea that there is a segment of Pennsylvania workers who are anxious about losing their jobs in natural gas. Like I can understand like that, they should be anxious because the government is not going to come in and provide any sort of sufficient safety net, any sort of sufficient guarantees that if they don't do what they're saying and replace natural gas or car manufacturing with something else, that they're going to take care of your family in the absence. But to me, like, That's what the left is for, right? It's not to guarantee someone that they're going to get the exact job they want. It's not to guarantee someone that they're going to, get their dream job. It's to say, well, at least when you don't get your dream job, because what does that even mean? There's no such thing as dreaming of work. That you won't fall into abject poverty, and the media and society won't blame you for it, and you won't die on the streets. It's like, where that we'll cover your basic needs without having to tie that to a job that is deleterious for the entire environment. Because I feel like that's a hurdle we come to all the time. Like, well, we can't get rid of coal. We can't get rid of like X bad industry du jour, because like, what about the people who are at least unemployed? It's like, well, guaranteeing employment is not, I would say, a core facet of my ideology. Untethering employment from, the ability to live is. And it should be where we're moving, not like keeping things around just because like they're vestiges of a system that we need to, move past. But I agree. I think that like the government and the politicians are allowed to abdicate responsibility for replacing these jobs with providing something to fill these vacuums, and then just go like, well, I guess that means we can't get rid of them, and the earth is going to die or some shit.
Right. Absolutely. It's totally the idea that, getting, moving to different industries because other industries become obsolete has to result in everybody losing their job and being unemployed and unemployable too. It's a choice. If that was to happen, it's just a choice, because the government could step in and do something. They could be training programs, paid training programs, I should stress. They could easily transition all of these people to the new adjacent industry. It's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible.
It's possible. It's necessary. Other countries are doing it. Ultimately what it is, I think, is another example of the government abdicating responsibility for things that, other governments do readily and are expected to do from their citizens. And because we know that we just can't expect anything from them, we are forced to sort of like have this conversation as though there is not an interceding body that's supposed to exist to fulfill this role. Ultimately that's what the government is for. It's not to tell us that we can't stop burning trash, because what about the trash burners? It's to say, okay, well, once we stop burning trash, here's how we're going to transition the trash burners into a more socially responsible, socially productive, industry.
Right. Brandon, is there any clip you want to get to? One last clip, maybe?
Me, Brandon?
You, Brandon. That's right.
Me, Brandon. I mean, I don't necessarily have anything specific on my mind. I picked the last clip. Why don't you pick the clip?
All right, let's go to that one where the it's the last one, so let's do a silly one. Let's talk about let's play that clip of the local media speaking to a Massachusetts man who was just arrested for his role in the January 6th storming of the Capitol. He has an interesting take on what went down. I enjoyed it. It was quite a fun clip. If there was something fun to come out of January 6th, this clip certainly is it.
I'm a documentarian, and when you guys hear something, you guys show up as you do now and ask questions or record and see what happens. So that's what I was doing there.
So there are photos of you reportedly kind of stomping on camera equipment and stuff. Is that you in that picture the FBI is putting out?
I would not like to comment on that at this time, but I'm working everything out with the courts and whatnot, and that's that.
I think that's real. First of all, clever. Got to hand it to him for. I think that's the best way to go about it. You were there documenting everything. But I think the stomping on shit will certainly hinder his defense. If I was those local reporters, I would have said, I'm also here just reporting and documenting. Can I stomp on some of your shit? But go ahead. What do you, it's just a
credit real quick. That was WPRI in Rhode Island that did that edit, because that, I bash local news quite an awful lot. I think it's lazy and reactionary often, but that was excellent.
Right. Now, I don't know what this guy's role was in this. But I think obviously he has a consequence to pay for what he did, but I don't think people like him should really be the focus if all he did was, show up there, hold a camera, and stomp on and break some stuff. I mean, obviously,
If all he's done is destroy evidence, as somebody who is, just generally speaking, anti-snitching, I think that, a good thing. At the end of the day, I think it speaks to a certain level of entitlement in people's minds to go to like an event like this and to be documenting and taking photos and to be smiling and to be holding up their social security cards. I think that, at the end of the day, people don't want to talk about privilege because it's kind of complicated, and I agree it's overused, but there's just evidence of entitlement here that is unique to this particular subpopulation to think that they could get away with something like this and to be so confused by like what was clearly insurrection. And then we have to, in the media and like the public discourse, have this new affluenza conversation. Like, are people allowed to be so entitled that they could just commit riots without any kind of consequences just because they didn't know what was happening and no one told them? It's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can accept that, like, people, not necessarily we need to throw people into the carceral system, but we can have it both ways, that people can exist within this sort of like dichotomy of we have to have these people and like hold them up to this standard of like everyday average American who is like just trying to exercise freedom of speech, but also they're just a little too dumb to figure things out, a little too dumb to figure out that they're at a riot. It's like America is a little bit I don't know, very two-faced in that sense.
Right. Absolutely. What I want to see, though, is I want to see this same type of reporting. They should show up at the funders of this event, the big moneyed Republican backers who funded all the bus trips and the stages and the speakers and everyone's travel and all the things necessary to get down there. They should also bum rush and interview the people who were caught on camera and on audio planning the events in terms of Proud Boy leaders and militia leaders and
those people,
various groups.
A lot of those people, I think, are smart enough to cover up their tracks, at least try to. They cover up their face, cover up their tracks because they know what they're doing is not right. And I think that that's where like this kind of narrative that these people are actually culturally victims and not maybe just the victims of their own leadership leading them to the slaughter for monetary and like social gain is kind of funny, because like they don't behave as victims behave. They don't behave as somebody who's like being victimized by the state, because as somebody who's being victimized by the state, if I was at a riot, I'd cover my face up. That's the behavior of somebody who is very entitled and like is finding that entitlement being ripped away from them very quickly. And that's unfortunate because like at the end of the day, I could have told them that their, racist, rich founders didn't care about them. They had asked me. Right. I could have told them before they went. I could like, don't listen to Trump. Like, because you're going to be in jail and he's going to be calling you trash on television. That man does not care about you at all.
Right. It is amazing. First of all, perfect point. But it is amazing how many, like literally almost all of them weren't wearing masks because they just happened to do this during a pandemic in which they all staked their position as being anti-mask. Like you gotta believe that if this wasn't during the pandemic, like more of them almost guaranteed would have been wearing some sort of face covering, but in their own little political protest refused to wear any face covering due to the connection of it being a mask for the pandemic.
Their organizers aren't doing them even any favors there. Like, I mean, it's easier to focus on the consequences for this sort of, I guess, loose coalition of right-wing hanger-ons who aren't self-avowed white supremacists, but who are just being confused by like this level of sheep herding going on that's being just diffused into our modern media via free speech activism or pundit culture, whatever you want to call it. It's, like it's easy to forget that, at the end of the day, these people are also dying from coronavirus alone, though. Like, this is an event that's easy like to focus on because like a bunch of them, but like their leaders are also getting them killed from coronavirus at numbers that we don't know. We don't know how many people would have worn masks if Trump and Fox News otherwise had chosen their own mask. And that's just an analogy and an indictment of our system so far, because that's the same as other things with gun violence, with not having Medicare for all. A lot of these things are allowed to exist and be promoted by millionaires, pundits, etc., in order just cynically, not because they believe them, a la Tucker Carlson, the math, but to raise money and to shore up viewership. And then when old people die, like, because we're hamstrung by this idea that as long as you're not literally touching somebody, it's just their fault. It's the personal responsibility of the people who have been left at the rally or who have died in the streets because they just thought the coronavirus was not real. And the only real mention they're going to get is from cynical actors who want to use the fact that like just guy's going to go to jail because no one cares. This guy who went to the rally, maybe he was confused, maybe he wasn't going to go to jail. That's just going to be used as a tool by people to prove that they shouldn't get banned from Twitter or that you shouldn't harass Bill O'Reilly at dinner. And that guy's still going to jail. No one cares about that guy, but his family and himself. And that's that's just the reality of it. And even people who want to defend these people as middle class, whatever, like that's not going to keep them out of jail. Like helping to deplatform and get rid of people who are tricking them is going to keep them out of jail. Like giving them tools to not listen to the far right.
Right. Well, I think you are on fire there. I agree with the IMer here. Rank and file, Brandon Sutton spitting hot fire today. But I will add that the first person, a woman, has officially involved in January 6th, has officially been served her sentence. And what she was, if I recall correctly, she was not facing jail time. If I recall correctly, they gave her time served for her role, and she's now home. Will never have to be in prison for this. So even though they might not be as lucky as their rich backers and the people who got them there, they're still benefiting in other ways in terms of. I'm just sorry to interrupt, but just as a personal reason, I would never advocate jail for somebody, generally speaking, and never specifically in the case of like trying to burn down an American landmark. That just seems like, talk about setting bad precedents. I wouldn't want to, throw out the baby with the bathwater. So, I don't think they should go to jail. The question of like, how do we punish them? What do we do with them? I don't think that's necessarily always a meaningful conversation, because if the system was open to our feedback, we wouldn't have, prison abolition, now would we? Right. Like if the system was open to like listen to what I think should happen to these people or what I think should happen to organizers, we would have a much better country. So it seems like in reality, what we're getting is a lot of rank and file who are going to be dragged into the system, going to be dragged in front of courtrooms. Maybe they get a few months, maybe they don't. But, at least at a certain level, some of them are going to have a much more real interaction with the carceral system that they supported. And like ideally, they won't go to jail, but they'll be woken up to the reality of what it is for the rest of the country. That entitlement that led them to the Capitol building without masks might help them, might be stripped away from them permanently. And, unfortunately, that's just the reality of how it has to work in our country. I agree with you on any sort of sentencing for these guys, especially the vast majority who appear to be dupes. Not the ones who are violently, breaking in and leading the charge and things like that. Obviously, there should be different consequences for the people who planned this thing. And I totally agree with, a lot of people are going to, focus on those who were visible on video, who just basically walked in because they were dupes. But I don't share your optimism in terms of these people being woken up by the system. They'll see it as, they didn't get caught up in it, and obviously, if others were innocent like they were, because they view themselves as innocent, they do. They also would have gotten the same slap on the wrist and gotten away. So the people in there must really deserve it.
I mean, I always try to be a little bit optimistic, but I'm inclined to agree with you. I would say that direct interaction with some of these systems, healthcare, police, prison, that, so many people are convinced because they never deal with, that are functional, is the quickest way to wake people up to how dysfunctional they are. We saw that with, the BLM protests last summer and the continued coverage of police violence, like making people more aware of it, making people more disgusted by it. But I also think that you're right in the sense that we have an entire propaganda network out there, not just Fox News specifically, but just an endless web of content creators who will take that interaction with the carceral system as it exists and try to turn it into like this vague conspiracy narrative where like, well, the only reason you're being sent to jail is not because like prison and like the American system is bad, but there's this infiltration in the CIA and the FBI of leftists who are just trying to like send all of these real patriots to jail. And it's like, okay, no, that's just the FBI, just the normal FBI. I could have told you that too. I could have told you that. And so, I think a lot of people's instinctual reaction will eventually be tamped down by enough propaganda where it's like, okay, yeah, my interaction was bad, but it wasn't because of like the cops are bad. It's because like there's a cabal of like Jewish, lesbian, Black people leading the cops, causing them to do this. It's all very complicated.
Right. Also, the slippery. You bring up a great point about the. I could talk about the slippery slope. A lot of people, a lot of contrarians, especially, like to use like, "Oh, this is what the left advocated for, and now it's coming for them." I mean, no. If you're going to make that slippery slope argument, it's the other way around. These institutions, like the FBI, have always been giving shit and causing problems for the left. If someone was to speak out and be brave and side for those who aren't on the same side as they are, it would have been the right decades and decades ago. Like they're the ones who watched the slippery slope, if that's what you even want to argue, and didn't do anything about it.
It always feels less of like a slippery slope and more that a lot of people have accepted, the neoliberalization of social justice under different terms. They believe in like trickle down social justice. They believe in that kind of second wave feminist idea that if basically the highest clout, highest financial potential portion of a population is not being safe from, whatever larger scale social phenomenon, social atrocities happening to everybody, happening to the entire phenomenon. What does that say about, the rest of those people? That's the first step. Like if Oprah can't buy a $35,000 purse without being subject to racism, what does that say about the people in Cabrini Green projects? Like, doesn't say anything. That really doesn't say anything. But a lot of people see that. They see that association with power. They're looking for clout. They belong to that loose social position of like public intellectual pundit, whatever. And the idea that what they're arguing for is being born out of like a very, very narrow class allegiance versus like what is actually going to promote widespread or social or even get the ball rolling, it's ridiculous. We just like with social change, it's bottoms up. We know that there's no way that like preventing Nazis from being kicked off of Twitter is going to stop Trump from being kicked off of Twitter. I mean, it's going to stop like leftists from being kicked off from Twitter. That doesn't make any sense. Like saving Trump does not implicate any of us because it was happening before that. I think, it's a little bit disrespectful to like define a problem like 90% the way through it by once it happens to somebody who you feel a little bit of kinship with.
Right. Let's go to some IMs really quick. I totally just realized that we started early, so that means we end early. So Matt and Brendan, I'm going to just quickly read like just a handful of really quick IMs, and then that's the show. Late for Life asks, how did the recording session go, Brendan? Oh yeah, Brendan, I meant to ask you this. How was your band's recording?
Oh, it was really good. Man, I want to plug the guy's studio, but it's out in Paramus, New Jersey. It was really good. And we cut 4 tracks, and those should be getting released over the next couple of months. We still need to go back and master and do little things here and there, but they sound pretty good.
All right, look forward to hearing it. Illuminati Kids, it is interesting how many of Crowder's references under duress were of old children's media like Peanuts and Velveteen Rabbit. Right. Nug Wrangler, does Brandon Sutton know his maxes for bench, squats, and deadlifts? My bet is 300, 420, and 500 respectively. The world wants to know, Brandon, what is it?
Well, obviously, after coronavirus, I've been like left a little bit without the tools to check, but the highest I've ever done on all 3 is I can bench 335, squat about 500, so like 485 for like a set of 4 to 6. I've never done a 1 rep max squat because I'm a baby. I'm afraid of falling. And I can deadlift like 550 pounds.
Damn. I mean, to your point though, I mean, I can tell you've been lazy during the pandemic. I look at you and I could see you really let yourself go.
I mean, honestly, I did. I was making those lifts at like 185 when I was just, fresh out of grad school, veins full of vim and vigor, and like now I'm struggling to put up 300 on the bench every so often. I'm just kidding. I would never struggle to put 300 on the bench. That's a little lifting joke for all my lifting fans out there.
I didn't get it, so I'm glad you you clarified. Train Boy Binder, you should interview Julia from the Corner Spatty podcast about the Estonian far right party EKRE. They have a 9-point communication plan that is very successful and could be repurposed by the left. I will have to check that out. Thank you, Train Boy. Nerd Cheetah says, I think Meghan McCain will start a bedtime stories for children channel. Torture stories my dad told me. My father, you mean? Gabagool says, Binder, you look like Gomez Adams. You should buzz off that Hitler haircut. What? Excuse me. I could take the Gomez thing, but the Hitler haircut. First of all, it's not a Hitler haircut because the sides are shaved, and it's long down the middle. I believe it's tentatively it's more specifically called a soccer mullet, I think.
Like a
Football
youth haircut, a Hitler youth haircut is what you're trying to go for?
Yeah, what country plays soccer, Bender?
What country plays soccer? Oh, yeah, just us.
Not America.
Germany.
Oh, wait, I guess we do.
Right?
Famously German.
Is that true?
I will say no. Our IMer is incorrect. Meghan McCain is going to write a children's book, a spiritual sequel to Are You My Mother, called Have You Heard About My Father?
Right. Right. Aaron is not cool. Did you hear about the black TikTok dancers who went on strike because white creators taking profit off their work, and now white dancers don't know what to do with new hip hop songs that come out?
That's awesome.
I heard about this. Yes, that's pretty funny and good. I mean, good for them, but also funny about the white. I think actually I saw that like there was a few like black TikTok dancers who put out like really bad, lazy, like purposely bad dances just to see if they were like, if people tried to do them, like thinking they were serious. And there were like a bunch of white TikTok users who did like who did not see that there was a joke and tried to replicate them. V says, man, this Bitcoin in El Salvador sounds itchy and scratchy, like itchy and scratchy money from The Simpsons. Yeah, I'm actually, we'll use that. That'll be the final IM. I'm really looking forward to seeing the fallout from that. Not to spike the football or anything, but yes, to spike the football.
Hopefully it doesn't hurt like, the people and just hurts Bukele and his goons.
Right. All right, folks, that is the show for today. Check out my show, Doomed with Matt Binder, tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time at youtube.com/Matt Binder. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel now if you're watching the show right now, youtube.com/Matt Binder. And I'll see you guys tonight. Brandon, what's going on with the discourse, buddy?
Well, with discourse, I'm going to be editing our latest episode where we talk about sorry, I got distracted by the mouse again. Where we talk about it's very cute. So it's obviously what we're going to talk about in discourse is going to be my adventures capturing the mouse. But no, we're going to be talking about the latest news coming out of the Trump campaign, or the Trump campaign, out of Trump's followers. We're talking more about Joe Biden giving more money to the police, police brutality, the results of the Derek Chauvin trial, and what implications it has for people advocating for prison abolition, et cetera, et cetera.
And Matt Leck, you said you won't be doing a Left Reckoning tonight, but you will be doing a stream of some sort. Where's that going to be?
I'm not sure, but check twitch.tv/literary hangover.
Cool. And Brandon, you'll let us all know when your band's music drops, right?
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Sam will be back tomorrow right here. It was a pleasure, Brandon, doing a all boys show. Dudes rock, buddy, right? And
I'm being erased. I was going to say absolutely. And you know what? When I take over Doomed next, I promise to have you on as a co-host.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll have you back on.
And Nomiki's coming up at 3 p.m. at the Nomiki Show channel. Other than that, I will see you all on the Majority Report next week with Brandon, and I guess Emma will join us next week too. And yeah, see you guys.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie fall. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in.